I faced police calls due to a classmate's misunderstanding about my bruises. Now, she must change classes and face the consequences. I, 19, am in a nursing program. We do a lot of physical exams on each other to practice, which involves wearing shorts and tanks. It's important to mention that I am permanently blind in one eye. I'm constantly running into walls, doors, railings, plants, people, animals, everything. As you can guess, I'm covered in bruises 90% of the time, on my blind side. In the course one day we were talking about signs of abuse and the teacher said constant bruising. I raised my hand and added that it's important to talk to the patient if they're an adult, before calling the police, as it could be something else. She asked for an example, so I rolled up my sleeve and explained that the bruises were from door handles of the school, which were varying colors and heights. She nodded and agreed. She said that with children, we call the authorities the moment we suspect abuse. With adults, we first attempt to talk to them, and if their reason seems valid, we don't call. The lessons continued, and about a week later, the cops showed up at my door. They told me they had received a report that I was being physically abused and always covered in bruises. I explained my disability to them. They checked my home, talked to my family, and found no further signs of abuse. When I asked questions, they told me they got my address from the university because they take abuse seriously here. When they talked to the university about me, the university was very concerned and just wanted to help me. After the police left, I talked to some people at the university, including a psychologist, just so they could be sure I had no mental signs of abuse. Then life went on. Well, I was still coming in bruises every day, and one of my classmates came up to me. She told me our classmate Kay was telling people she was thinking about calling the police again because I'm still covered in bruises. I got my classmate's report written down, alongside a few others, and waited. Sure enough, police showed up again. Same song and dance, but this time I told the university that Kay was using the police to harass me and I wanted something done about it. The university decided the best course of action was to move her from my labs to the other ones so she couldn't see whether I was bruised or not. She's now told me I'm an asshole and that she was just trying to help me and I didn't need to mess up her whole university schedule. Relevant comments. Deleted user. She really didn't learn the lesson the class was taught, did she? A lesson she needs to understand if she's going to work in this job. If she'd done what the teacher taught, talk to the adult, then none of this would have happened. She brought this on herself. Comment 1. She was harassing you by carrying on calling the police. Once can definitely be out of concern, but after everything was checked out and you were safe, she decided to continue, so it's totally on her. OP, I was fine with the once, it's okay, people make mistakes, but after the second time I wanted to make sure it'd stop. Comment 2, I'm not blind in either eye and I'm also always bruised. My legs and sides always have a big purple knot somewhere. It's a daily occurrence. Multiple doctors have said it's not a medical issue. I just have terrible spatial awareness for where my body is. I run into door handles, my work desk, and counters. I get my clothes caught on stuff all the time. It's entirely my own lack of attention and clumsiness. Comment 3, Kay knew about your disability and literally learned in class about talking with the patient before reporting. Additionally, Kay could be a serious danger to her patients if she did this with a DV case. The abuser may escalate when confronted by police, which can create a dangerous and potentially deadly situation. Comment 4, Kay found out the consequences of 1. Not believing you, and 2. Not minding her own business. She needs to learn to rein that in, or she's not going to keep a job as a nurse with assumption-making skills like that. Comment 5, genuine question. How do you get bruised almost every day? Do you have low sight in your other eye as well? Do you wear eyeglasses? I'm blind in one eye as well, by birth. I'm short-sighted, but I rarely get bruised running into things. I usually sprain my ankle due to not noticing unlevel ground or hit my toe on the wall corners due to blind spots once or twice a year, but the peripheral vision and the angle at which I turn my head to keep my eye at center is more than enough to not bump into things so frequently. OP, I'm nearsighted in the other eye. Stuff on my left side is just impossible to see. Glasses get in the way of some of my peripheral vision. Keeping my head turned too long causes stiffness in my neck and I have to be able to turn my head fast and quick. As I said, well, I get bruised a lot. It doesn't interfere with my job. It's something I've grown up with. And I bruise easily. I don't bump into anything at home, but in the outside world I do. Comment 6, I ask this as a nurse, and I mean no disrespect, but are you sure that nursing is the best field for you given that impairment? OP, yes, I love helping people, and I'm fully capable of the job. I'm the only one who ever gets injured in my daily life, lol, and it's typically because I'm not paying enough attention to my surroundings and don't notice something new and trip on it. Update 1. Okay, so, I'm blind in one eye, I run into random stuff if I'm not paying enough attention. I'm covered in various bruises. Showed this during class while talking about abuse and how we have to talk to adults before calling. Girl decided to call the cops on me twice claiming I'm abused, resulting in me forced to go to counseling, talk to therapists, police, etc. until everyone was assured I wasn't abused. So anyways, it's been a bit since that post and I have big updates on her. I called her K in the other story, so let's stick with that. So anyways, I had previously gotten her removed from my labs. We still shared class, not lab. I figured everything was fine now and she'd leave me alone. But I was wrong. Not only was she spreading rumors that I was abused, but she called the cops again. Apparently more than once, as the other 2 times the cops said they had a report of abuse. This time they said reports. When I asked how many reports, they said that it was multiple people. So I don't know if others in class called or she had her family do so. I just don't know. They couldn't tell me who called due to privacy when it comes to reporting, to try and make sure abusers don't attack the reporters. Apparently my university had attempted to stop them when the cops spoke to them, but the cops had to check anyways, so they came after talking to the university anyways. And again we did the same song and dance. I told them I felt like someone was using the cops to harass me. And the cops took this. They said no one would show up again. And anyone that calls would now have their name taken down, and if they call after being told not to, they'd be charged with harassment. Well, that was about a week ago, and someone continued calling, tried to claim a different name, didn't realize they record phone numbers as well. So there's your update on K. She called again, and again, and again until it got her charged with harassment as well as misuse of police resources. Not certain what's gonna happen going forward or if I'll be called to testify. I'm not certain what's happening, but I haven't seen her since I was informed that she's still called, which I found out from another classmate. Relevant comments. Deleted user. What's the school doing about this? Is she getting expelled for harassing you? OP, seeing as she's probably ending up with a criminal charge, she will be expelled. Comment 1, you're not just protecting yourself. You're protecting the patients she might have had in the future. She's got big issues. Comment 2, this really pisses me off. My toddler has von Willebrand disease, so her blood doesn't work the way it should. She is so covered in bruises all the time that she looks like a Dalmatian. She also has paper-thin skin, so she has many cuts in a day. One day she even got the corner of her eye open from the corner of a pillow. Last summer we got a call from the CPS. Someone called them that we are beating our child and that they have seen it. This is not true. And if you really saw a parent beating their 1-5-year-old child, wouldn't you stop it when it was happening? Not called a week later. Best part was that we weren't even in the country when the beating took place. Someone was just mad because we have been renovating our house and the noise was too much for them. Pure harassment. Comment 3. I read your other post and was glad to find this update. While I agree Kay is definitely in the wrong and needs to have the consequences of her actions. Hopefully not being a nurse is one of them, since she seems unfit for it. I really came here because I was so upset about how people were saying you shouldn't be a nurse because you are blind in one eye. My brother is blind in one eye. Actually, he has had a prosthetic eye since he was a kid. He has been a nurse for more than 30 years. ER nurse, cardiac surgery nurse, trauma unit. He's done it all while having no sight on one side. People that say you can't be a nurse need to F off. They are narrow-minded AHs. Also, my brother rides a motorcycle and has done since he was a teen. Do what makes you happy and F all the rest of them. Good luck on your career. Update 2. I don't know exactly where to start with this post, but I kinda want to give this update because I'm hoping it's the last one. So I made my last post only 12 days ago and shit kinda went down. Now, I need to explain that quite a bit of this is secondhand, because I luckily avoided the crazies. So basically, Kay does not know where I live, knows the general town, but nothing else. I did invite one girl in our class to my house to work on a project. She was the only person other than the university that knows where I live. Kay knows this, because her and girl who Emma call Lily, are kinda not related. Lily's cousin is married to Kay's cousin, so they knew each other prior to the program but not really well, and Lily is also the one that told me about Kay still calling even after the police promised me they would not show up again. Which they haven't, they just started taking down the numbers and keeping track of who called, when, and did they call after being told not to. So basically, Kay knew me and Lily were paired up for the project, knew Lily came to my house, did not know where the house was, or what it looked like, just that it was in a town X kilometers away from where they were. They also knew the town name via Lily's mom, so I got warned by Lily that Kay's mom was going to try to find me to get me to drop Kay's charges. I'm not the one charging her. The police are. I have not pressed any charges despite some people saying I should get a restraining order. Lily warned me, and I hid in my house and did not leave until Lily told me that Kay's mom had returned home, Kay's mom then proceeded to harass Lily in an attempt to get Lily to give Kay's mom my address so she could knock on my door instead of driving around aimlessly hoping to spot me. Lily refused, and deleted all text between me and her to ensure that even if Kay's mom stole her phone, and somehow got past the password, that she would never get my address. Lily then informed the university of the situation, and had proof via text, that the university had her print off and give to them, and the police. The university's security are now watching for Kay's mom's car, and Kay's mom, security is informed that if and when I'm at school they are to escort me to and from my car is also to be parked near cameras, by order of the university, until the situation dies down. Luckily I'm at clinicals and not anywhere near the university. Kay was kicked out before clinicals so has no idea which clinics the students are at, or which I'm at. Had she stayed in longer, she'd have a literal list posted to the class page, about where I'm at, and where in the building I'm at. Kay's family apparently was informed by the police that any attempts to contact me would be harassment, so says Lily. Can't guarantee, but yeah. I kinda don't know how to feel. The next time I have to go to the uni is for exams in like 3 weeks, so hopefully Kay's family doesn't hold on to this that long. Until then I'm safe in a building filled with security, locked doors, and places to run. The placement was also informed about this situation and with pictures from Lily, who's at a different placement, are watching for Kay's family, and has banned them from the premise in advance. So yeah, if this goes no further I won't update anymore, but if it gets worse I guess I'll update after my exams and the HSI. Wish me luck because I'm gonna try to not stress too much about the K situation and focus on my finals and HSI, instead of that, but don't know how that go. Hope y'all are enjoying my mild suffering and it entertains you, even if only a bit, so that some good can come from this situation I can't believe I'm in right now. So, yeah, thanks again for the words of encouragement and kindness some of you showed me during this insanity. Wish Lily some luck as she's being bombarded by her family to give Kay's mom my address, phone number, etc., and doing her best to hold out on this while making sure her phone is never out of her sight on the off chance she leaves it open. Anyways, hopefully this is goodbye. If not, well, I'll see y'all in 3 weeks for another update. Relevant comments. Comment 1, I don't understand why there is so much drama from Kay and her family. Like what the heck is happening that they feel the need to harass you? Have you presented a restraining order? OP, hi. I still don't feel a restraining order necessary as they really only keep people willing to listen away, and that's not really the case here. I plan to just avoid it, the police and courts handle it and forget it ever happened. Comment 2, this is going too far. What's wrong with that woman? And has her whole family gone insane? Not only are they harassing you but they're putting your family in danger. She's basically accusing them of abuse. It could damage their reputation but also put their job on the line depending on their fields. It's good that they are providing you with security but it's still not enough. Lily won't possibly be able to warn you every time that woman goes out of her house. In case she eventually finds your house and comes to threaten you, you should probably get cameras for your door to record everything. When you say she was kicked out, do you mean the school? Because I really hope your university realized how unhinged Kay's behavior has been and how unfit she is to start a career in this field. Not only does she lack common sense but she's also acting in a deranged manner. Targeting someone like that is not acceptable, especially not under the fake pretense of trying to help. Had you really been a victim of abuse, you would have probably been even more traumatized by this situation. OP, hi, so yes my house has cameras already, and Kay has been removed from school due to pending charges and should they fully go through she will never come back. Her access to everything has been suspended and she's basically already expelled. They are just awaiting charges to go through before they actually push the expulsion through.
My parents told my brother he could have my house, and I should live in the camper in the backyard since I'm single and he has a family. 1 hour story. Post on January 23, 2023, begins in 2020. November 2022. I'll warn everyone here that this is going to be very long. So long that I'm splitting it into 2 posts and including a summary for each. I don't really care who believes this. It's just so crazy that I don't blame anyone who calls it false. I won't argue about it. But this happened to me. I also don't care if anyone in my family sees this. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. But I'm also not going to reveal any details that would clue anyone into who I am that doesn't already know me. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I have a brother who's 29, and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22 and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that. And the fourth was born a couple of months ago. His wife, my sister-in-law, and I do not get along as she always tries to provoke me by acting superior. Then she turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliate in any way. She can cry in an instant and put on a very convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that. But she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house. And privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything unless people called them out on it. Which did happen a fair bit by other family members. This is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically abusive towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had. And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equally to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy, and loved gossiping and drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on, and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out. But couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was in low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation. But I didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start of the 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job, and couldn't renew the lease on my condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all of my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life. Until then, life wasn't kind to me. And I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply because I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally hoped to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it had cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park my camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could until I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And sister-in-law thought it was absolutely hilarious that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck/camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were apartment people. And I was pretty attached to my area as well. So I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. At that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts, to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point someone who told me to move claimed to be with a homeowners association. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned what homeowners association, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. To have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone, but I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and require fuel anyway. So I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again. Though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money. But I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse in old employee parking spaces literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get as long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at a friend's apartment, or at my local gym as the camper didn't have a shower in it, and only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse, and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with the night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have air conditioning, so I had to get a used portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay and learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor, and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property. But I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my Facebook. My family saw the post, and that's where this mess really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother along with his family came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address. So how they found out where I live I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like rambunctious tourists. Then they just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around and my sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why. And it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now. And it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. Sure, not now, but maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they'd planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone. And I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4. And my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes, and even curfews. And that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily. But certainly not him. Or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact kind of situation in videos online many times. And never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it so ludicrous. But my parents, brother, and sister-in-law do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic entitled crazies. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording. Then just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said, "Hell no." And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs. And acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it, won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total nonsense because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course, I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids, and I don't need all the space. So I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything. And he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this, and that I will. I yelled, as if their word was law or something, and told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then right on cue my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting. But to sum it up from this point on I heard the line, "Just do it for Dan," way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them all they don't have a say in my life or my house. And to get out before I called the cops. My sister-in-law screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again, and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her, she just assumed she could take and take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up person who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be, and to not come back. Then I told sister-in-law that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I'll press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and sister-in-law. I responded by telling her I won't be. Update 1, January 25, 2023. Part 2 of parents trying to take my house for my brother. They broke my locks to move in while I wasn't home. As I stated in the first half of my post, many will find this unbelievable and long. Yes, I am aware there are similar sounding posts online already. I've seen a number of them now. But it's not like those posters have a monopoly on this sort of situation happening to them. If anything, I'm surprised this site hasn't been better weaponized against this sort of thing, since entitled people should be more afraid of getting outed here. But anyway, I do not blame anyone who calls this false. I would too if I was reading this. However, by reading this and my first post, you'll know just how messed up my parents are. As in my life they were the root of all evil that spoiled my brother into the person he is today. They have never given me a real reason for why. And I kind of fear there isn't one. Some people can't explain why they make choices like child favoritism. So it's all they can do to try and stand by the child they backed. Which is exactly what my parents tried to do. And I've practically destroyed their lives for it. Not in the legal sense, but more an emotional one. After I kicked my parents, brother and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately went to my social media and told the story to the whole family. It spread pretty fast, but you won't find it now because it all got deleted some time ago and I put my own profile in private. I posted about it because I knew that the first thing my family would do when they got home is try to twist the event to make me the villain. And I was exactly right. But I had about an hour to get started before them. And I had video evidence to back up my story about what they'd done. No, I don't plan on showing the video here, so don't ask. Being preemptive worked because I got a fair number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother and sister-in-law must have been all set to write their own post, but it was too late. So they didn't even bother trying to lie much. My parents, Dan and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys supporting them, but not much else. Plenty of others knew how entitled they already were. So what happened was something they all quickly understood and accepted. There was one person in particular that called me. I don't know who they were. But they ranted at me that I was a horrible brother and I needed to make way for a real family man. I just ended the call and blocked the number. This didn't repeat. The week went by and my parents showed up with Dan at my front porch just like they said they would in their prior ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and also pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened it just a crack, and they tried to shove their way in again. But I'd installed a couple of latch chains that prevented it and even braced my body against the door for good measure. My father and brother demanded I let them in. But I said I was recording everything on camera and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down, and then in her most sickly sweet tone asked me if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told her and the rest of them to leave and never come back. My mother put on the crocodile tears and asked me why I can't just do this for Dan because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and then bluntly said I do not love him as a brother because he treated me terribly for years, and they only encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents, and he is a terrible brother. Then told them to leave or I'd be calling the police as soon as possible. They all left surprisingly easily, apart from my mother's loud crying and the others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over. But I guess I should have taken them more seriously, because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family there moving stuff in. He just waved to me with a smug grin when I saw him. I was furious and told him and the rest of his family to stop. But sister-in-law smugly said to me that like it or not, they were moving in. And then in the most fake way while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said that it was okay, because my mommy allowed it. And I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I seethed with rage just hearing those words and looking at her smug face. So I locked myself in my truck to call the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop. And that I can't do this to her because she and Dan need the house. And she cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" I responded with, "Forget Dan, it's my house, not his." Then she threatened to scratch the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police. All of which the 911 operator heard thanks to the window being slightly open. I told sister-in-law if she damaged my truck, I'd sue her. And she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan and sister-in-law along with their kids had locked themselves in my house. I told the cops what had happened, as well as showing them my new driver's license that had my current address on it. Then when we went to my front door, I saw that they'd changed the lock. And the old lock was laying on the porch with the center of it drilled out, and the drill they used was laying right next to it, with a complete Harbor Freight drill bit set. Could they have been any more stupid leaving evidence out like that? I pointed out the broken lock and drill, then gave the police a rundown on all the events that happened prior. Well, I guess Dan called our parents over at some point after I arrived home, because they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied and started saying that I'd agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I said that was an easily provable lie one way or another. So Dan and my sister-in-law finally came out of my house with some papers in hand. They both looked super smug, like they'd somehow outsmarted me. They'd actually drawn up and printed out a fake rental agreement. But my signature was not on it. There was one, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever actually seen my signature. So that was incredibly stupid on their part. I told my parents and Dan that it was blatant fraud. And if the cops investigated, they'd easily figure that out. And I don't think going to jail and court would do them any good. It could even make Dan lose his job, which is his only means of providing for his family. I also said I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost, stolen or broken. And I'd call Child Protective Services too for good measure. Dan went white and looked really scared when I said all that, but my mother got between us and doubled down about how I should just do this for Dan, and live in the camper so they can finally have a family home to themselves. I yelled at her that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could do it for Dan herself and let Dan have her house to himself instead. The cops separated my mother from me and I said I wanted them all out right now or I'll press charges. I stated in a shout about how they drilled out my front door lock to break in. The lease papers were obvious fakes. They badly forged my signature and I have recorded video of my sister-in-law attacking me. Those are felonies I could ruin their lives with if I wanted. And if they didn't leave, that's exactly what I'd do. The only reason I hadn't already was for the sake of Dan's kids. So they have one chance to get out. The moment my parents heard that, I think it finally clicked that they could not force me to do it for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she'd put an end to this. Then she went over to my sister-in-law and spoke with her quietly for a minute while my father spoke to Dan. My sister-in-law instantly started loudly crying and ripping up the fake rental papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, only to have an officer tell them to pick up the bits of paper or he'd cite them for littering. Both of the cops at this point had the "I don't get paid enough for this" looks on their faces. Dan had to start telling his kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, and the eldest was sobbing that he won't get his own room now. My sister-in-law and Dan gathered their kids up to try and make one last pathetic attempt to guilt me with the sad family routine. You know, where they all gather together in a sort of group hug while all facing one direction. I swear, I think they'd practiced it beforehand. All of the kids had the same pleading look with quivering mouths. My sister-in-law kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look like a sad puppy, and my brother just made the saddest face he possibly could and said, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't falter and told them to keep packing. All the kids and my sister-in-law turned the crying up to 11, and Dan yelled at me, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help our family." I ended up laughing like a maniac and retorting that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing. And no amount of crying will make me let his family move in because he's no brother of mine anymore. He's just an entitled person who thinks he can take whatever he wants from me like when we were kids. Dan started cursing at me until the cops told him to cool it or he'd be in cuffs regardless if I wanted to press charges. He sucked in his lips and looked a mix of afraid and supremely pissed off. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother and sister-in-law had all left. And they said they had no intention of going anywhere until this had been resolved. In fact, in the next few minutes 2 cops became 4 as more drove in for whatever reason. That gave my parents some extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock he'd put on my front door, though I got another lock the next day anyway because I didn't know if he had copies of the keys or not. He was really reluctant to hand them over. Then instead of handing them to me, he actually threw them down the street and into a storm drain while saying to go get them myself. But one of the cops scolded him for that and made him go get them. He had to pull the grate off just to get at them. And he got pretty dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he just grumbled, then slammed them down into my hand. I then told them all to leave and never come back. My mother said I'd be disowned for this, as if that were some kind of threat to me. And I voiced that to them. Then in an overly sarcastic way I said something along the lines of, "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys where I always get treated terribly by you all anyway. Because Dan has always been your obvious favorite. You treated me so badly when I was growing up that if Dan ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So do like you always told me to do when I was mistreated by all of you and suck it up." My parents were floored after I said all of that. And the quartet of cops were looking pretty judgmental at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put nasty parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops. Because they'll likely not try anything really stupid then. My mother just started crying and walking away. My father just stood there looking like he wanted to hit me. And Dan just held his kids in defeat. Oh, and my sister-in-law was off having a tantrum in my front lawn. Soon enough they all formed a line handing out boxes and got their stuff out of my house. Nothing had been unpacked yet. So it all was taken out pretty quickly. But while doing it, my mother kept saying it wasn't too late, and I could still do it for Dan several times. Each time trying to bargain more and more to try to make me change my mind. She said that Dan could pay me rent if I let them stay. And when that didn't work, she said I could move back in with them to let Dan rent my house so I wouldn't have to share the building. I told her to shut up and keep packing boxes because I don't want Dan or his family around. I don't want his money, and I certainly don't want to live with him or my parents ever again after the way they treated me when I was a kid. Making a deal with my parents would be like making a deal with the devil to me. My sister-in-law ended up having another tantrum after hearing that and threw a box down, then sat on the ground to have a pity party because she didn't want to go back to sharing a house with my parents. And she just sat looking angry and sad there until everyone else was finished. She didn't even want to get up when it was time to leave. They finally got everything out of the house and into the truck. So before they left, I laid into my parents one last time about all of the stuff they put me through growing up. And with 4 cops being right there, they couldn't do much other than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on so many things that happened. And even pointed out how they couldn't just do something nice for me. Like letting me stay over with my camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Dan and my sister-in-law ridicule me and call me a bum. Well, who's the bum now? They wanted to kick me out of my own house so Dan could stay in it free of charge. Yet when I needed a place to go they wanted to gouge me for more than I could afford just to park my camper when they knew I was out of the job. There were more extremely judgmental stares from the cops when I said all of that. So I put my parents on the spot one more time and asked them what I ever did other than being born to deserve being treated so badly. Because when I finally have a bit of success in life, they want to snatch it away from me for their favorite child since they'd rather I give everything to Dan and have nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money that I earned. I owed them nothing, and I won't be asking anything from them ever again. Because clearly I will never be anything more than a doormat or a cash cow in their eyes. I got no answers from them. They just stood there looking like fish out of water. So I continued ranting and asked them what in God's name made them think they were such good parents after all of that. My father was beet red. But more from embarrassment than anger this time. And my mother was crying that she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed that she is a horrible person. They all are. And I bet they'll go to hell for it too. They were awful people, and they all knew it. But if I'd called them out on all this stuff in private instead of in public, they'd just get mad at me and still act like I'm in the wrong. They'd just kept up the denial for so long that it became a part of who they are. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket to cry. And my father looked more defeated than I've ever seen him. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished putting everything back in the moving truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen. Not that I'd had a chance to get much furniture yet. I was lucky to even have a couch at that time. They all got back in their vehicles, and my sister-in-law just stood staring at me with malice until my brother finally got her to drive the minivan home. And as soon as they were all gone, I got back online again and spilled the beans about what happened. My parents were too embarrassed to even try and defend their actions this time. And while the family was somewhat split before this incident, it was now a landslide in my favor. Nearly all of the family has sided with me after this incident. And those who haven't simply aren't siding with anybody. No matter how much my parents previously tried the "we did it for Dan" line, no one listened anymore. So any remaining familial support they had is now gone. Many in the family who I expected wouldn't side with me, did. That includes the former flying monkeys. So I guess they've finally had enough. Around that time I offered to host half the family next Christmas Eve in my new house. My parents were not invited. Surprisingly, I wasn't blocked on my brother and sister-in-law's profiles. And I saw my sister-in-law had her fourth baby in early November. They are still living with my parents. I'm pretty sure they knew I was watching, because my sister-in-law kept making passive-aggressive posts every couple of weeks or so about not having enough space while living with my parents. Probably to see if she can still guilt me. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father up the wall because they aren't getting any peace and quiet in their old age with 3 rowdy, obnoxious kids, a mentally unstable sister-in-law, my golden child brother, and a newborn baby in the house all at once. Perhaps they could move into a camper in their own backyard and let Dan take over their house completely. They might get some peace then. Yeah, they could do that for Dan. There was supposed to be more. But this post got way too long. So I'll be posting part 3 later. Update 2, January 30th, 2023. November 2022, just after Christmas 2022. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law showed up to Christmas at my house when they knew they were unwelcome. I was trying to keep things to 2 posts. But I realized while compiling everything that part 2 was just too long. So I've divided it into part 3. For those who commented en masse to get cameras, I will when I can afford it. I am still in financial recovery from buying a house last year. And as far as I know, good cameras need a decent computer to record to. And I do not have anything more than a 3-year-old laptop that runs Windows 10. Yes, I am aware of doorbell cameras. That will be the first kind I get. For those who kept saying that I should have just gotten my brother and sister-in-law arrested, the only reason I did not was because they are parents. Their kids need them. And if Dan was arrested, he would likely lose his job. And without that, his family has no money. And my sister-in-law has a baby who is only months old right now. Neither of them need to end up in jail, but you do not need jail for revenge. Police can help, yes. But I got payback without filing a police report. Would I be this merciful again? More than likely not. And they know it. I decided to wait on making an account and posting until after the new year, just in case more stuff happened. And it did. As previous readers know, my sister-in-law was making passive-aggressive posts on social media that were obviously directed at me. Especially after my sister-in-law had her 4th baby in November. She was posting the same repetitive nonsense over and over again. She just found semi-clever ways of rewarding it. But she pretty much kept regurgitating that she was tired of living with my parents, that there is not enough space, she needs her own house, blah blah blah. I know I sound dismissive, but live through what I have with these people and you would be ready to sarcastically play tiny violins in front of them too. They are just that bad. And since I waited until January to make an account, more happened just like I thought. I stated before that I had invited half the family for a Christmas Eve party at my house. And everyone I invited all came, even though it was a fairly long drive of around 3 to 4 hours for them. But they wanted to come and show me their support. I was praised by them a lot for how hard I had worked to get a house on my own, and that they were sorry for everything I had gone through. I was asked why I did not just take my camper and drive the 3 hours back to them, instead of living pretty much homeless for so long. And I had to sheepishly admit that I was very attached to living around here, and I had my best employment opportunities in this area. My hometown does not have a lot of great job opportunities in my field, if any at all. And I wanted to make my own way as much as I could. An answer they overall accepted. We moved on to having a rather nice party. The best I had been in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of great Christmas albums. And I have to say, the one my uncle brought to Ray Charles was my favorite. He sings Christmas songs like no one else I have heard. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like for once I could just forget my past issues and enjoy the moment. But I would not be writing this if it had stayed that way. About 2 hours into the party, You know who showed up? My parents, brother and sister-in-law popped in trying to look all smiles. They did not even knock. Just walked right in my front door like they were meant to be there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay and said they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I got another chance to speak. And he said they do not deserve to be in my home or my life after the shit they tried to pull months earlier. And he was backed up by several other relatives. Mind you, this guy is my mother's brother. And he used to love her to pieces until he found out about the shit that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, mother's parents, as old as they are, hurriedly got in between us and said to my parents that if they want to make amends with me, it is far too soon. And they have never been more disappointed in them than they were this past year. They had hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time. But no one was fooled anymore. And they needed to make a serious effort to try and actually treat me like a son if they ever wanted to be in my life again. Then they turned to Dan and my sister-in-law, and said they have seen the repetitive nonsense my sister-in-law keeps posting about. They are tired of it and to just let it go already. My house will not become their new home. My sister-in-law went back to her old standard of crying and had a pity party about how she should be the one living here and not me. She plopped down in a chair to have a tantrum and said it was not fair I got this house to myself when I have no family of my own, and she has 4 kids that need more space. And she just wanted a better place to live in and feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucks as a mother because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she sits on her butt all day drinking, playing on her phone or going out and spending all of Dan's money. And she has the nerve to complain about it. I even joked that I'm surprised her baby does not get drunk from her breast milk since she drinks so much booze. Which I admit went a bit too far as I got some stares. And my sister-in-law demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself. And if she wants to be able to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, then she needs to put her college degree to some use, get a job, and learn to save money. My mother already does most of the childcare for my brother's kids anyway. So she will have plenty of time after her baby gets a little older. My brother's eldest kid, who is 7 years old, ran up to start kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom. And he kept telling me about how his mom said that I was the bad guy who made her cry and did not let them live here. That is when my brother grabbed his son to pull him away. But all the other relatives jumped back in, and this sort of turned into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and brother. She was crying. Her new baby was crying. Her kids were crying. Hell, even Dan was very nearly in tears from the verbal lashing he was being assaulted with. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman I keep shoes in by the front door and looking like a complete wreck. He could not look anyone in the eye. He could not even say 2 words to me. Not with a whole house filled with angry people ready to judge him if he tried to let out his inner golden child again. If they were not there to get in his way, I would bet this would have ended up a repeat of when he tried to order me around to try and take my house months earlier. By this point, though, he had been so thoroughly humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were all off now. Soon after, my parents, brother, and sister-in-law all left in defeat. The party resumed and we all avoided speaking of what just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night in my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper so there would be enough space. I admit, it also makes a good guest house. My relatives all wanted a tour of it earlier as well. And they said they could not believe I had been living in it for around 2 years. I have a lot of questions about it. Like what summer and winter were like and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else on Christmas morning, and had a fresh pot of coffee and some ibuprofen for those spiked eggnog hangovers a few of them had. I was complimented on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas, my sister-in-law did finally stop making posts that were obvious digs at me and deleted all of the old ones as well. But shortly after the new year, she more recently made a new post complaining about how she had tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I did, so it could be set up in the backyard so Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. Well, a taste of one's own medicine is never fun. Because my parents turned that idea down, vehemently, I hear. No one is going to push them out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was only up for a couple of days before my sister-in-law removed it. and she has hardly posted anything since then. She loves to complain. But if a tree falls and no one is around to hear it, can it still complain? My sister-in-law, I guess, has realized there is no point in doing it when no one hears her anymore. And Dan cannot afford to move his family out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they end up expecting another child in the next few years, I will not be surprised. Things have mellowed down for me since then. And I have even invited friends over for a poker night. I suck at poker because I can never remember a damn thing about it. But so what? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while being merry idiots. We all loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had at it the best way 4 grown men can when they just want to have a good, unadulterated time and get piss drunk. I think maybe around summer I will look into possibly dating someone. I am not exactly getting younger here. Fingers crossed that goes well. My camper just sits idle in my yard now. And I admit, there were some days I went out there just to spend time in it. I did live in it for 2 years. It is like my second home. And maybe one day I will actually get to use it for camping, like it was meant to be. I have never been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time. So it would be a completely new experience for me. This pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law have all been staying very clear of me. In fact, they seem to have gone back to acting like I do not exist, like they did before I bought a house. Not like that bothers me at all. It is better that way. But they will inevitably come back in some way. I know they will. I just wonder what kind of stupid thing they will do next. If anything notable like all this ever happens again, I will make another post if this account is still active. Update 3, February 20th, 2023. Winter 2023. Sometime later in 2023. My parents and Dan were back sooner than I thought. And they wanted money this time. This will not surprise some people who commented on my previous posts because my parents did some of the exact things they said they would. They wanted either my money or my signature. I did expect the classic lines of narcissists saying that I owed them or giving me some kind of socialist nonsense about sharing the wealth. But that was just my imagination running wild. The ensuing situation was somewhat similar to that but much more tame, I guess you could say. They seemed to know not to push me too far now and were mostly aiming for pity. It began when my parents recently got in touch with me through social media and asked for a meeting in a public place of my choosing. It just screamed trap. But I was not afraid. In fact, I was amused. They know I am not to be messed with anymore. So I could only wonder what they wanted this time. I picked a local restaurant that may have the name of an olive and a garden in it and we met up there. Dan was with them, but he kept his mouth shut most of the time. We had awkward greetings, ordered some drinks, and then cut to the chase. My parents begged me to help Dan get his own apartment so he could finally move out. Apparently, Dan's credit is not so great. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that his wife regularly puts him into a hole? Well, they asked that I help by either supplying some capital or co-signing for the apartment and helping to pay the rent for it. I simply said no to both. That is when Dan spoke up in anger and yelled at me that I have so much, and I do not have a family to support like he does. He needed my help and I should be sparing the money for his family since I do not have one myself. I laughed and asked where they were when I needed their help. Oh, that is right. They were pointing and laughing at me for being homeless. Or should we go further back to my childhood? I would love to delve into that with plenty of ears to listen in around us. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me not to speak of any of it. My father and Dan both just looked away and said nothing. Pretty sure they wanted to say something like they used to at me, but held their tongues. I asked them if they thought I was rich or something. And their looks said it all. And when I told them I do not have that kind of money, they looked at me like deer in headlights. I broke it down about how much I had managed to save for the down payment on my house and the way I had to live and work in order to save that much so fast. And then how I spent nearly all of it on the down payment of my house. I am still in financial recovery. I did have monthly income to spare, yes, but most of it was going right into my savings. I asked Dan what his yearly salary was, and when he told me, I pointed out that it was actually a bit higher than mine. I then loosely broke things down in rough math in front of my parents on how about 70% of my income goes to my mortgage, insurance, gasoline, internet, phone, food, and other bills. And then there is maybe 30% of that left at most that I can put into savings. And I need that money saved to get back on my feet in time. And I have to make sure I have savings to fall back on. My truck is from the 1990s. If it were to break down, I would need money to either fix or replace it. And there are other things one would need a rainy day fund for, like home repairs, doctors, taxes, lawyers, or anything in general you would need quick cash for when it is a sudden unexpected expense. So as you can see, I just cannot spare money for Dan. And I also refuse to co-sign for anything, as that would leave me on the hook for any bill Dan could not or would not pay. Then I pointed out that that is likely why my parents did not co-sign for Dan's apartment themselves long ago. And my mother just started crying again. I was pretty much one step ahead of them in all of this. I am not an ATM and I am not a fool, and I stated that right to their faces. I expected my father to become angry with me like he always does. But this time he just, well, did not. I have known this man to explode on me for the slightest provocation of not enabling my brother all of my life. But this time he just did not do that. There was not even a sneer on his face. The only way I could describe the look he had was regret and defeat. Maybe regret for being a terrible parent. Or maybe regret because he cannot bully me around anymore. Who knows? Either way, my parents could not really argue with me, and I was not about to give them any money. Dan just got up and said this was all just a waste of their time, and that he was leaving. My mother started apologizing for him, but Dan still wanted to leave. Then, just to kill with kindness, I offered to buy them a round of unlimited soup and salad while we were all there. I guess they could not turn down free food since we had not ordered anything but drinks yet, and they stayed. I went out of my way to talk about anything other than money. Dan remained quiet, and was either eating his food or looking at his phone. But my parents just awkwardly talked with me. They brought up that they have recently joined a local Christian church, and that they had already been going for the last 2 weeks. I said good for them, and they of course started trying to advertise that they would like me to go too. I simply said no thanks, and they were smart enough not to push further. When the meal was finished, Dan left a $10 bill on the table for the tip and walked off without saying another word to me or anyone. My mother just excused his behavior and we all parted ways. That was about it. Not nearly as much drama as I thought there would be. But this is still far better than how things used to be with my parents and brother. As for my sister-in-law, well, she has been regularly complaining online about my parents. She really does not seem to like the fact that she is not the queen bee of their house. And I think her toxicity is finally getting to them. Why else would they be so desperate to come crawling back to me? My sister-in-law actually wants my parents to move into a camper like I had to do in order to make space in the house. And she is being told no, every time. She does seem to have a following of like-minded people like her though. Because here and there I get messaged by someone I do not know, that is intent on raging at me for not giving up my house for my sister-in-law. I do not bother to argue with these people anymore. I just block and move on. Though there was one persistent troll who had my phone number. And they call from a different number every time. Yes, it seems to be the same person who called me to say I need to make way for a real family man like Dan. But I could care less. The calls, though, seem to have slowed down, if not maybe stopped. Because I made it clear to that person that they were only amusing me by keeping this up so long. The last time they called was around the beginning of the month. And it has been silent from them since then. Update 4, October 5th, 2023. My parents and Dan were back sooner than I thought. And they wanted money this time. This will not surprise some people who commented on my previous posts because my parents did exactly what was expected. They wanted either my money or my signature. I did expect the classic lines of narcissists saying that I owed them or giving me some kind of socialist nonsense about sharing the wealth. But that was just my imagination running wild. The ensuing situation was somewhat similar to that but much more tame, I guess you could say. They seemed to know not to push me too far now and were mostly aiming for pity. It began when my parents recently got in touch with me through social media and asked for a meeting in a public place of my choosing. It just screamed trap. But I was not afraid. In fact, I was amused. They know I am not to be messed with anymore. So I could only wonder what they wanted this time. I picked a local restaurant that may have the name of an olive and a garden in it, and we met up there. Dan was with them, but he kept his mouth shut most of the time. We had awkward greetings, ordered some drinks, and then cut to the chase. My parents begged me to help Dan get his own apartment so he could finally move out. Apparently, Dan's credit is not so great. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that his wife regularly puts him into a hole? Well, they asked that I help by either supplying some capital or co-signing for the apartment and helping to pay the rent for it. I simply said no to both. That is when Dan spoke up in anger and yelled at me that I have so much, and I do not have a family to support like he does. He needed my help and I should be sparing the money for his family since I do not have one myself. I laughed and asked where they were when I needed their help. Oh, that is right. They were pointing and laughing at me for being homeless. Or should we go further back to my childhood? I would love to delve into that with plenty of ears to listen in around us. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me not to speak of any of it. My father and Dan both just looked away and said nothing. Pretty sure they wanted to say something like they used to at me, but held their tongues. I asked them if they thought I was rich or something. And their looks said it all. And when I told them I do not have that kind of money, they looked at me like deer in headlights. I broke it down about how much I had managed to save for the down payment on my house and the way I had to live and work in order to save that much so fast. And then how I spent nearly all of it on the down payment of my house. I am still in financial recovery. I did have monthly income to spare, yes, but most of it was going right into my savings. I asked Dan what his yearly salary was, and when he told me, I pointed out that it was actually a bit higher than mine. I then loosely broke things down in rough math in front of my parents on how about 70% of my income goes to my mortgage, insurance, gasoline, internet, phone, food, and other bills. And then there is maybe 30% of that left at most that I can put into savings. And I need that money saved to get back on my feet in time. And I have to make sure I have savings to fall back on. My truck is from the 1990s. If it were to break down, I would need money to either fix or replace it. And there are other things one would need a rainy day fund for, like home repairs, doctors, taxes, lawyers, or anything in general you would need quick cash for when it is a sudden unexpected expense. So as you can see, I just cannot spare money for Dan. And I also refuse to co-sign for anything as that would leave me on the hook for any bill Dan could not or would not pay. Then I pointed out that that is likely why my parents did not co-sign for Dan's apartment themselves long ago. And my mother just started crying again. I was pretty much one step ahead of them in all of this. I am not an ATM, and I'm not a fool. And I stated that right to their faces. I expected my father to become angry with me like he always does, but this time he just, well, did not. I have known this man to explode on me for the slightest provocation of not enabling my brother all of my life. But this time he just did not do that. There was not even a sneer on his face. The only way I could describe the look he had was regret and defeat. Maybe regret for being a terrible parent. Or maybe regret because he cannot bully me around anymore. Who knows? Either way, my parents could not really argue with me, and I was not about to give them any money. Dan just got up and said this was all just a waste of their time, and that he was leaving. My mother started apologizing for him, but Dan still wanted to leave. Then just to kill with kindness, I offered to buy them a round of unlimited soup and salad while we were all there. I guess they could not turn down free food since we had not ordered anything but drinks yet, and they stayed. I went out of my way to talk about anything other than money. Dan remained quiet and was either eating his food or looking at his phone. But my parents just awkwardly talked with me. They brought up that they have recently joined a local Christian church, and that they had already been going for the last 2 weeks. I said good for them, and they of course started trying to advertise that they would like me to go too. I simply said no thanks, and they were smart enough not to push further. When the meal was finished, Dan left a $10 bill on the table for the tip and walked off without saying another word to me or anyone. My mother just excused his behavior and we all parted ways. That was about it. Not nearly as much drama as I thought there would be. But this is still far better than how things used to be with my parents and brother. As for my sister-in-law, well, she has been regularly complaining online about my parents. She really does not seem to like the fact that she is not the queen bee of their house. And I think her toxicity is finally getting to them. Why else would they be so desperate to come crawling back to me? My sister-in-law actually wants my parents to move into a camper like I had to do in order to make space in the house. And she is being told no, Every time. She does seem to have a following of like-minded people like her though. Because here and there I get messaged by someone I do not know, that is intent on raging at me for not giving up my house for my sister-in-law. I do not bother to argue with these people anymore. I just block and move on. Though there was one persistent troll who had my phone number. And they call from a different number every time. Yes, it seems to be the same person who called me to say I need to make way for a real family man like Dan. But I could care less. The calls, though, seem to have slowed down, if not maybe stopped. Because I made it clear to that person that they were only amusing me by keeping this up so long. The last time they called was around the beginning of the month. And it has been silent since then. Well, I figured I'd wait half a year or so after the original post to update everyone, but it ended up being longer than that. Yes, things did go bad again. But not really for me for the most part. I'm pretty much fine, if not almost unscathed since last Christmas, apart from the time my parents and Dan came to me for money, as my last post told, and a more recent confrontation between me and sister-in-law you will read about here. I did get a few cameras for my house, including a Ring doorbell in front. I did not tell my family about the cameras just in case. But thus far no one has attempted a break-in. I think the way I outed them all before scared them into leaving me alone, for the most part anyway. I've taken to renting out 2 of the rooms in my house. One to a close friend, the other to a friend of said close friend. Both have been fantastic tenants. They know to keep quiet and leave me alone most of the time, and even have small refrigerators they keep in their rooms so they do not need to keep any of their drinks in the main fridge. The deal I gave them on rent was too good for them to pass up. It increased my monthly income well. And even after taxes, I'm still monthly putting away some decent amounts in the bank since the rent money pays a good chunk of my monthly mortgage. You're all probably wondering how my parents, brother and sister-in-law took to me renting out those rooms to friends. Well, the answer is, not well. My father and Dan stayed out of it. But my sister-in-law freaked out, which made my mother come crying to me over how I could have rented those rooms to Dan and his family instead. We had a bit of an argument in which I pointed out for one thing, they fucking broke into my house before to try and steal it. She would not want to let someone who did that move in with her. Also, there was not enough room for me, Dan, and his entire family in my house. Not that I would ever share a roof with them anyway. It's a 3-bedroom, and a manufactured home no less. I have the master bedroom and its adjoining bathroom. That would have left only 2 small rooms for Dan, sister-in-law, and 4 kids. Not to mention they would be annoying to me all the time. Also, she knows very well I can't be around my sister-in-law because she intentionally antagonizes me. And they all mocked me when I was homeless before. Besides, my current tenants are both single guys in their 30s I get along with. My mother had some sobbing excuses for a while, but she finally let it go and admitted she was just desperate. Edit, parents found out I was renting rooms out because my sister-in-law basically stalked me in some way. Then she told my parents, and then my parents contacted me. And then my mother came over to cry about it. Since then my parents have not bothered me once about the house. So things are good for me. My parents and Dan, not so much. It turns out my sister-in-law is a far worse person than even I thought. I already knew she was a gaslighting, self-victimizing drama queen. But she sank even lower. Because Dan's youngest child turned out not to be his. Yeah, you all read that correctly. Sister-in-law had an affair. Which in retrospect is not all that surprising. And something a few people here totally called months ago. After being caught, the sister-in-law was ousted from the family. Dan just recently finished with his divorce. Which actually went in his favor since we thankfully live in an at-fault state. Dan also sued to get his name taken off the birth certificate of the youngest child and won. Basically, after the incident where my parents tried to force me to hand over my house, things got pretty tumultuous over at their house. Sister-in-law blamed me, a lot. She was convinced somehow that I had tons of money, like I had won the lottery or something, and that I should share the wealth. Apparently, it was her idea that they come to my Christmas party because she hoped they could all try to get on my good side. It was also her idea to make my parents and Dan try to get money from me for an apartment. So it really burst her bubble when Dan and my parents informed her of how my finances actually were. For the longest time, she had Dan and my parents fully engulfed in her toxic mindset, and only fed their narcissism with her own. So her blaming me made the rest of them blame me. That is until what happened in front of the police when they tried to steal my house. That is when the downfall for my sister-in-law really started. My parents and Dan were apprehensive about coming to my Christmas party after the way I had outed them. But my sister-in-law convinced them to just throw together a few cheap gifts from what they could get at the last minute and just show up because he'd never throw us out once we're already there. Boy, was she wrong. She gambled on that plan, and with the complete blessings of everyone I had invited threw her and the rest of them out. Her plan, she no doubt thought, was the most clever thing ever, backfired in her face spectacularly. I guess being chewed out by family at my party not only wrecked my parents' reputation even more, it actually started a wake-up call for them to eventually not listen to my sister-in-law anymore. And as I said in my last post, my parents decided on going back to church. Perhaps because last year I had said they would probably go to hell for their actions. I cannot say that's the real reason. But you gotta admit, it would feel kinda satisfying if that was the case. Though my parents hadn't been to church in 2 decades before going back. While I don't think it's a bad idea that they're going to church, they need to understand that going doesn't just give them a do-over for all the shit they've done in the past. But I have a little faith they're at least trying, because my parents came to my house without Dan to personally apologize to me after they had seen an animated video of my first 3 posts. That's right, they have known about this Reddit account for a long time now. They also know everything I'm saying. Yes, they're unhappy about it. But I feel everyone here deserves an update since it's anonymous. For my parents and Dan though, watching an animated video of themselves and their own actions was a great way to make them see what kind of people they really are. And they came over to apologize to me later. I had never seen my father apologize like that to anyone. And the man is not a good actor. So this felt genuine. They fully acknowledged what they did to me, and how there's no excuse for any of it. They even described themselves as narcissists, and admitted the truth that they had wronged me very badly. Then they went on to blame my sister-in-law for a lot of things. Yeah, they kinda threw her under the bus. But it's not like she wasn't guilty of everything they said. My parents have been getting counseling for a while now too, and did offer group family counseling, but I declined as I'm not ready for that anytime soon. Dan himself didn't apologize to me for some time, but he looked extremely remorseful any time the past was brought up. Meanwhile, Dan and sister-in-law's marriage absolutely fell apart. It wasn't a crumble, it was a cascade. Without me as the scapegoat/black sheep/ATM that they couldn't mock or try to get money from anymore, and after the public humiliation of social media, my Reddit posts, and the animated online video, sister-in-law finally let out enough of her toxic on Dan and my parents for them to realize she's not the person they thought she was. Their denial had been strong, but my sister-in-law's entitlement was stronger. I've had many thoughts of lightsabers clashing over this drama. Sister-in-law clad like a bimbo Sith with a lightsaber that looks like a giant lipstick, or something like that. I imagine there's a wealth of puns and jokes to be had there. But I really didn't bother to think much more detail about it. But as you can imagine, things only got worse because my sister-in-law kept looking for other ways to get what she wanted. She kept bringing up ads for used campers and RVs to try and get my parents to buy one to live out of, so they could have the main house. And she kept doing this no matter how many times they told her to stop. She even tried to say my parents should just buy an RV and have a life on the road, like normal old people do. That was stupid, even for my sister-in-law. The opposite was suggested by my parents, that Dan and sister-in-law buy a camper themselves to live out of it instead. Sister-in-law basically said she shouldn't have to do that since she's the mom. She pretty much lorded the fact that she thought she had total parental authority over everyone's heads because the kids in the house were all hers. And when my sister-in-law didn't get her way, she actually took her baby and left the house to disappear for several days. They knew she was fine because her phone was still working, and she was responding to texts with short but passive-aggressive answers. And when she came back, she was only more embittered because nobody caved to her demands while she was away. Sister-in-law also refused to go to church. But Dan went with our parents and took his kids along as well, save for the youngest since my sister-in-law refused to let him take the baby anywhere. Personally, I don't go to church. I believe in God and all that stuff. But I just don't like church. Besides, it never did me any good growing up. Update 5. October 7th, 2023. Just so everyone understands, A lot of this information came from Dan and my parents. So I'm just telling what I know. Everything really hit the fan when Dan suddenly called out his wife as a cheater in March. This shocked us all because we thought he was a complete pushover to her. But no, he's not. At least not anymore. You all know how he treated me when I was on his bad side. Well, his wife wasn't spared that hire at all. He started putting pieces together about her deceit after finally pulling his head out of his ass and secretly got DNA tests for all his kids. 3 of the kids are his. But the youngest one, the baby, was not. For the record, Dan and I both have pretty dark straight hair that's almost black. Same with our parents. Sister-in-law's hair is straight and pretty dark too, but the baby's hair is lighter and a bit curly. At first, Dan just thought it was because of the baby's age. Sister-in-law kept playing it off, and said that it would darken in time. But the baby's hair never got darker. I guess that was Dan's biggest clue. He confronted his wife with the DNA results in front of our parents. And she broke down sobbing that it was a mistake. Sister-in-law pulled out all the Darvo stops of denying, trickle-truthing and gaslighting. But Dan had none of it and actually had done more to find out about her affair than I would have ever thought. I knew he was smart. He just let himself be dumb. He had detailed proof of her cheating with phone records, texts he got off her phone, bank records, and the DNA test. He even identified the man she's cheating with, who is likely the father since he has much lighter colored curly hair. The evidence against her was crystal clear, and Dan said she was so bad at hiding her affair, he didn't even have a hard time figuring any of it out once he started looking. My parents demanded that my sister-in-law leave their house immediately. That's when she went psycho on them all. First in just yelling. But she quickly got physical. Police had to be called by my mother. And yeah, my sister-in-law was arrested. She scratched up Dan and my father quite a bit with her long fake nails, and even harmed her eldest kid in the crossfire by hitting him hard enough to give him a black eye and nosebleed when he tried to intervene. Dan was smart enough to have his phone recording nearby when he confronted her. So the police had all they needed to arrest her for assault. The sister-in-law's parents had to drive over to bail her out. Then they came back for the baby, sister-in-law's stuff, and her car as well. A couple of days after sister-in-law got bailed out, she showed up at my house because I was apparently next on her shit list. As soon as I opened the door, she went on a delusional rant where she called me out about posting on Reddit. Then said I was the entitled bane of her existence. I'm not sure, but I think she might have been high on something, because this felt extra crazy for her. And her eyes didn't look right. She claimed mothers with young children are the most sacred thing in the world. Then went on yelling that giving up my house shouldn't have been too much to ask for. Because supporting the family was the least I could have done. And if I had, then her family would still be together. When I tried to talk while she was spewing all that out, she actually attempted to shove me and cover my mouth. She even had her hand poised like she was ready to scratch me. Well, that went about as well with me as you can expect. I'm not exactly one to be threatened and told her I'd call the police if she didn't take her hands off me right that moment. I also told her I'd got it all on my doorbell camera. She started panicking the moment she heard camera. Then I ended up verbally savaging her to the point she was backing off my porch. I told her she had some gall to call me entitled when she's exactly that. She didn't work for anything she had anymore, cheated on her husband and got pregnant from her affair partner, made my mother do most of the parenting for her children, spent Dan's money till they were in a financial hole, and acted entitled to my home to the point of trying to steal it. I called her entitled X1000 and that she's a greedy bitch who is blinded by narcissism. Then I told her to stop blaming me for her own actions and to never show up at my house again. Being told all that was pretty much all sister-in-law needed to hear before jumping back into her car, then peeling out and speeding off. This was finally the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Now that she was separated from Dan, I ended up finally going to the police and filing a report on her for harassment and the assault she'd done on me last year, and her putting her hands on me at my front porch only added to it. The police have it all on record now. And I gave copies of the video to Dan for his divorce lawyer. And yes, I did file for a restraining order against sister-in-law. It was easily granted because it was obvious the woman is unhinged. She's not made a social media post about me since that I could see, but that's just because she put her profile on private. I hope her blame ship against me has long since sailed. Either way, she's left me alone. Sister-in-law was still with her affair partner during the divorce. At the time, I had no real idea of what kind of man he was. But any person who monkeys with someone else's spouse and even has a child with them, really doesn't have a lot of morals to begin with. Once the divorce was underway, sister-in-law admitted that Dan just wasn't man enough for her anymore because he couldn't afford to give her the lifestyle she wanted. She actually believed herself to be on the level of a trophy wife, and that she deserves to be with someone wealthy. Dan said he pulled a me and maniacally laughed at her. He said she was nowhere near hot enough to be a trophy wife, along with mentioning many other faults she had. Sister-in-law ended up humiliated by this and ran off like a child. Due to having to live with her parents, sister-in-law was forced to work in their family business because Dan wasn't giving her access to his bank accounts anymore. She'd already maxed out all the credit cards he previously gave her. And she griped about having to work for her parents despite having a college degree, but I think they were the only ones who'd employ her anyway since she's got a criminal record and a decade-long gap in her resume. I've heard from Dan that her parents were severely disappointed in her as well. But that was just a rumor. They could be just as bad as her for all I know. Either way, the shit show of a divorce really took off once it got going. Sister-in-law didn't walk away with much from it. Especially because she had an affair, physically hurt her father-in-law, husband and eldest child. And it's an at-fault state, like I mentioned earlier. So she kissed any chance of getting her way goodbye. I'll go into detail about it in the final post. Update 6, October 9, 2023. Fall 2023. This is what I know about the divorce from my brother Dan. Dan's lawyer pulled some strings to get the divorce started as fast as possible. But it cost him. I don't know the specific details or how much it all cost. They never told me. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, was financially backed into a corner very badly. And you know what can happen when you corner an animal. She fought back. But the law was not on her side, nor were her dwindling finances. Her parents had to pay for a lawyer for her. And not a very good one either. Also, she actually brought her affair partner to the divorce court to testify on her behalf. This guy was a real piece of work. He had a bronze tongue and a charming smile he tried to use to his advantage. He claimed my sister-in-law had been wronged by an incompetent husband, which is why she sought the arms of another man. He claimed he was ready to take responsibility for the child he had fathered with her, but that she would still be needing alimony to help support herself and care for said child. He remarked that because Dan at the time was still on the birth certificate, alimony should be one of his obligations. Dan said this guy used big words and a charming smile, but seemed an extra special kind of stupid. And coming from Dan, that's saying something. The judge was also not swayed in the slightest and told the bronze tongue out that he was a hypocrite for saying he was ready to take responsibility for his own child, while also holding his hand out for money from the man whose marriage he'd helped ruin. That shut him up. Dan was prepared to sue his wife's affair partner for alienation of affection too. However, that fell through. I guess it would have been on Dan to prove how much she'd loved him before the affair started. But after her mask came off and we saw the real her, we're not sure if she ever really loved him at all, or if she just loved having a meal ticket. Someone here pointed out my sister-in-law probably kept having kids to avoid getting a job. And you may have been right. Either way, she tried dragging out the divorce. But Dan's lawyer and the judge kept that from happening much. I swear, Dan must have seriously lucked out, because he got one of the meanest and most unsympathetic to cheaters judges in the state. And all the evidence we had on my sister-in-law made it easy to keep her from playing the victim. So instead she just let her real bitchy self out since there was no point in hiding it anymore. The court had all the records provided by Dan and myself, police reports, photos, and recordings to prove she was an abusive narcissist. There was a mountain against her that she had no way to climb over or hike around. She tried standing against the mountain. But that was prime avalanche territory. At the end of the divorce, my sister-in-law struck a deal to end things quickly. Dan takes 3/4 of the credit card debt, gets his name off the affair baby's birth certificate, and she walks away with only partial custody of her children, no alimony, but also without most of the credit debts she racked up. Her being legally employed by her parents meant she had an income of her own to fall back on to start paying off her debts. She can see her other kids almost whenever she wants and can take them on weekends. But for whatever reason, she has made very few attempts to even see them. She took them out to eat fast food a few times. But she never took them home with her. The kids are back in school now. So that gives her even fewer opportunities to see them. You'd think her parents would want to see their grandchildren. But they haven't contacted Dan about it. They barely saw Dan's children before that too. Now they may not even bother to see them at all. Do they hate kids or something? Even Dan doesn't know. But he tells me his in-laws were always indifferent to him. As for Dan, well, he really did love his wife a lot. So the betrayal of her cheating made him hit the bottle hard. Rewind back to the night of his confrontation with his wife. He came to me in a stupor with a whiskey bottle in hand, and his face all scratched up and covered in bandages. I wouldn't say he was drunk yet. But I freaked out seeing him looking like that at first, then berated him for driving under the influence. But that didn't really mean much to him compared to the betrayal of his cheating harlot of a soon-to-be ex-wife. We spent a few hours hanging out in my camper so as not to disturb my tenants. All the while Dan was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle and crying that he's a fool. And how he regretted ever marrying my sister-in-law. Pretty much any time he mentions her now, he just refers to her as that bitch. So that's ex-sister-in-law's nickname now. Ironically, this time together was the most bonding Dan and I have done in 15 years. While he didn't exactly apologize to me, he called himself a shitty human being with terrible taste in women. Then said I at least didn't make his mistakes. Despite all he previously did to me, he's still my younger brother. And I couldn't risk letting him try to drive home. So I told him to stay the night and managed to take his keys. Then set up the bunk in my camper for him to use. I rented out my spare rooms after all. He was in no shape to drive home. And if he'd taken an Uber, he'd have to pay for it, and then have to come back for his car later. He was still a depressed crying mess and didn't want our parents or his kids to see him like that. And frankly, I was worried he'd do something insanely stupid if I let him leave. I didn't want him to sleep in the house, so putting him in the camper was the best option. Just because that bitch screwed him over, doesn't mean I suddenly trusted him. So better for him to sleep it off in the camper. We both spent time in the camper playing games and watching movies on my portable DVD player. Poker was no fun with just two people, and Old Maid was just boring. Thankfully I had an UNO deck too and an old-school battleship game. He really liked those. It was enough to keep him distracted until he was finally willing to lay down after running out of whiskey. He threw up a lot of it in a bucket anyway. But he was not opposed to sleeping in my camper. In fact, he found the idea kinda cool. Dan had a lot of questions for me about how I'd lived in the camper for as long as I did. And I answered them all, if not just to keep him busy. But I needed to go to bed myself since I had to be up early. So I left him with my portable DVD player and a couple of movies. That way he could amuse himself alone for a while if he even managed to stay awake. Before leaving for work in the morning, I popped in while Dan was passed out in the bunk and left a bottle of ibuprofen and an energy drink on the counter of the camper's kitchenette, along with his car keys and a letter explaining to leave through the backyard gate. He saw himself out without trouble around 1:30 p.m. About a month after ex-sister-in-law, aka that bitch, was kicked out. Dan came to me asking to borrow my camper. I guess he found it more comfortable than I'd thought when he slept in it. And he fully admitted he didn't ask sooner out of pride. But with his soon-to-be ex-wife out of the house, he'd decided to give up his room for his eldest kid. He's got 2 girls and a boy, with the boy being the eldest, and now 8 years old. The kids were all forced to share a room until that point. They just had curtains up for the boy's half of the room. But the boy often slept on the couch to avoid his sisters. I know the poor kid was really desperate for his own room. So I guess Dan decided to finally make a better decision as a dad, and came to see me in order to beg to borrow my camper so his son could have his room. If he could have afforded it, he'd have bought his own camper instead of relying on me. And even said as much. I hadn't even gotten the chance to use the camper for actual camping yet. But I caved and let him use it since it was actually for a good cause. And he promised to buy his own in time anyway. No, I didn't ask for rent money for the camper. Dan is in enough of a financial hole as it is right now. Ex-sister-in-law and the divorce drained him. And I've learned that I get far better results with family lately by not being spiteful. I loaded my camper up and put it down in my parents' backyard. And my father put in a 30-amp breaker so it'll have enough power for Dan to run heat and AC when he needs it. I do miss the camper. After all that time living in it, it kind of felt like it was a part of me. But the only reason I loaned it out was for the sake of Dan's kids. Pretty much the only reason I still do anything for my parents or Dan is for the sake of those kids, as I've bonded with them. And yes, I know I may not get the camper back for quite some time. And likely not in the kind of condition I lent it out in. But I've warned Dan and my parents that they will be financially responsible for any damage they do to the camper, as well as its upkeep for as long as they have it. I also took many time-stamped pictures and videos of the camper inside and outside before lending it out, so I can prove its condition before it leaves. Dan even recorded a video with me agreeing to my terms. So that's as good as a contract. With the financial drain of the divorce, Dan's not going to be able to get a place of his own for years, I'll bet. Though he seems to have no complaints about living in the camper at least. But I don't know if he actually likes it or if he's just putting up a front. But I can guess it reminds him of the backyard forts we had as kids, since that's how it felt with me sometimes. Either way, he's living in it now. I did get some major props from the extended family for letting him borrow it too. I'm now referred to by a lot of them as the good brother Dan doesn't deserve. Either way, I think getting rid of sister-in-law was a great first step in mending the family as a whole. I still have little care for my brother and parents after the way they treated me all my life, but I'm not gonna let Dan's kids suffer for it. Those kids have actually really warmed up to me. They're actually happy to see me when I come over, or when they visit me. I've even babysat a few times. Now that they don't have their mother's toxic influence around, they've become much nicer kids. Especially to me. I'm actually getting to enjoy being an uncle now. My mother is still doing the bulk of the parenting for my nieces and nephews, and she's been acting as nice as possible to stay on my good side. My father often looks very defeated in my presence, but otherwise, he's been either stoically quiet or just generally nice to me. But he won't talk to me much. Though that's leagues better than how he was before at least. I'm not letting my guard down either way. My parents do seem happier that my ex-sister-in-law is gone. And they often say they don't know what they ever saw in her. My mother especially, because the two of them butted heads over who was the mom in the house for a long time. Now for the last part. At the same time as the divorce, Dan sued to have his name removed from the birth certificate of the baby that wasn't his. That bitch didn't really want to change it because it meant no more child support from Dan if she did. However, there was a court-ordered paternity test for the man identified as the baby's father. I was prepared to laugh in case it turned out he wasn't the father either. But he was. Dan's lawyer had a long talk with ex-sister-in-law's lawyer. She had no leg to stand on, and Dan was ready to go to bat to make her situation even worse. She didn't have the finances to fight him any longer and agreed to change the birth certificate. The bronze-tongued lout who'd knocked her up did man up to take financial responsibility as a parent, but he ended up not staying with her. He contacted Dan through his lawyer to tell him he'd broken up with that bitch and that he wouldn't bother him again. I checked the social media of that guy after Dan linked me to it, and the lout was upset that now he's financially responsible for a child he never planned to have. And that he's too young for this. Guys, from what Dan's lawyer was able to find out, that man is just over 40. He looks younger than he is. But he's by no means a young man. Shortly after that, he put his online profile private. Ex-sister-in-law did the same with hers a long time prior. So I've no more information left to give. This may be the end. Ex-sister-in-law is out of our hair. My parents and brother have finally made a real effort to be better people. I'm surprisingly happy as an uncle, and my house is still my house. Update 7, October 24, 2023. Ex-sister-in-law saw my posts. And is mad she can't do anything about them. No surprise my ex-sister-in-law saw my Reddit posts. She can't contact me about them in any way but with a lawyer thanks to my restraining order against her. And she likely can't afford to get a lawyer right now anyway since the divorce financially drained her too. So she complained to Dan about it and demanded he tell me to delete my Reddit account. But not only has Dan read my recent posts, he no longer cares. He said they serve as a reminder of the person he used to be. And he's not losing sleep about it. Besides, I've still helped him out despite all he's done to me. So he's not going to be upset about it. My parents have also made sure to try and treat Dan and me more equally when I'm around too. My father is still a man of few words around me though. Someone pointed out that changing now after so long of treating me as the opposite of Dan means he doesn't know how to connect with me anymore. And I think they're right. I don't mind the way he is now though. My mother has also developed a habit of saying she's sorry about every little thing in my presence. Dan told me that she and my father have been reprimanded a lot by extended family and their counselor, and now my mother feels like she needs to apologize for everything. This is all a stark contrast to how they used to treat me. Also, I didn't talk about before what ex-sister-in-law's opinion was on Dan borrowing my camper so his son could have his and ex-sister-in-law's old bedroom. Well, like a stereotypical bully, she looked down on him and mocked him about it because now he's living like a bum, as she put it. But Dan took it all in stride and asked if she was done yet, because he knew this was exactly how she'd react. And he just plain doesn't care anymore. She's borderline dead to him, and her insults were on deaf ears. Then he pointed out to her that he was living out of the camper because he was putting his kids ahead of himself so his son could have his own room. Something his ex never did, despite being their mother. She just weaponized her children and pregnancy to keep from working and to emotionally blackmail everyone. Then he asked her to remind him how that was working out for her. Mind you, this was early on in their divorce. I'm sure you can all guess her reaction. Dan said his ex did have quite the tantrum about my recent posts. But no one has bothered to contact me on her behalf to take them down. So she just has to live with the well-deserved shame. She has been trying to act nicer to Dan lately. Guess the grass isn't so green living with her parents. Dan tolerates her as the mother of his children whenever they meet, but nothing more. He will never take her back. He's told me that he can never look at her like he used to. And the very thought of her turns him off emotionally. So ex-sister-in-law pretty much has no chance of reconciliation. I have no new info on ex-sister-in-law's affair partner. His social media is still locked down. Same with ex-sister-in-laws. And it's likely to remain that way as long as I have a chance to read them. Update 8, November 5, 2023. My truck got egged on Halloween. Happened in the middle of the night, very early morning on the 1st. I suspect it was my ex-sister-in-law. But the person my cameras recorded was wearing layers of heavy sweats and had their face wrapped up along with big glasses covering the eyes. You could not really tell if they were a man or woman. They came on foot too, so no identifying a car. They did look at the ex-sister-in-law's height though. But that is not much in the way of evidence on its own. If it was ex-sister-in-law, she knew about my cameras. So covering her face and body for petty eggy revenge was probably the smartest thing she's done in years. Way to finally put her college degree to use. By egging a beat-up old pickup truck. The egger showed up around 3 a.m. I was deep asleep and did not hear anything. Whoever it was that appeared that night, quickly threw a dozen eggs or so, all over my truck. They did not attempt to do any more damage at least, and were gone in a flash as soon as the last egg was thrown. I did not see the mess till I was leaving for work in the morning. I ran my truck through a local car wash during my lunch break. That took most of the egg off. Had to scrub it a bit more later after work. Egg really are not good for the paint. But the truck is from the 90s, and does not exactly look mint anyway. I did take photos and filed a police report with the CCTV footage as evidence, but so far nothing has come of it. There was no real damage other than my minor irritation and $15 at a car wash. If ex-sister-in-law did do this, then she was smart enough to only throw eggs and not key my paint or slash my tires. So my insurance would not be involved. I do not think much will come of the police report as the cops seem to dismiss it as a probable prank by a teenager. I get they were probably overworked, but at least the report will keep a paper trail in case of future incidents. I waited till now to post because I wondered if anything else would happen. But no. Just right back to peace and quiet. I would appreciate any good advice on the matter though. Just in case something like this happens again. Update. Asked around with some people on the street about cameras possibly seeing the person who egged my car. I got responses ranging from, "We do not have cameras," to "It was Halloween and people pulled stupid pranks. Let it go." The few people who were helpful told me that I waited way too long to ask, and the footage auto-deleted. So basically the egger got away. But if it was ex-sister-in-law, I am guessing she had to walk around a half-mile in those sweats just to not get her car spotted on camera or something. It would not surprise me if she questioned if it was even worth the effort. Oh well, I guess I'll just wait and see if the egger comes back next year. I did hand out printed pictures of the egger though. And even stapled a few up on posts. So now people in my neighborhood are aware at least. The tenants renting out 2 rooms in my house have stayed out of it, And I do not really blame them. It's not their problem. New update. Dan returned my camper and ex-sister-in-law got a driving under the influence. But I've also got a copycat that has made my family upset all over again. June 25, 2024. To start this off, I came back after all this time to find 500 messages in my inbox and 130 unanswered PMs. Please don't PM me anymore. There's just too many to answer. So if you PM'd me and I clicked ignore, I'm sorry. Just know that's why. It was not personal. I just felt too overwhelmed to reply to so many. But that's not what brought me back to Reddit. I decided to stay away at least a year because my posts were not exactly boosting family morale. So I didn't log in for quite some time, but then the other day my brother Dan spotted a video with an unbelievably similar to mine in far too many ways. Only it was about an OP with a twin sister instead of a sister-in-law. But it had so much of the same. Entitled Narcissistic Parents, Guy treated like shit all his life and then rendered homeless, golden child sibling, keeping the favoritism a closely guarded secret from family while the OP was growing up. Sister still in her 20s has 3 kids and was pregnant with a 4th. Sister's eldest son attacks OP, and above all them trying to steal the OP's house by breaking in while he wasn't home. So many parts were nearly identical. Even 2 lines like, "Suck it up" and "My house is not up for grabs" were in the video. My parents and brother are frankly pissed, and I wasn't happy seeing the video either. We've all been trying hard to get past our previous family dynamic and what ex-sister-in-law put us all through. You can imagine it took a lot for me to let go of my grudges. But in a year my parents and Dan have improved more than I'd seen in my entire life before that. And I love me nibblings to pieces. So whoever wrote that copycat story, congratulations, you just sent my entire family right back into needing therapy. And yes, my family is aware I'm making this post. Now with that rant over, here's what I hope to be my final update. Now for what was stated in the title. I had a few naysayers before. But Dan kept his word. My camper was returned to me a few months ago and in good condition. Dan took good care of it and thoroughly cleaned it before giving it back. He and our father also resealed the roof on it once while it was in their care. Inside it's no worse for wear than it was when I was living in it. Only I got it back smelling like pine cleaner. There was some minor drama while Dan was living in my camper from a neighbor right behind them. Not quite sure she qualifies as a Karen. But she was close enough. She started yelling at them from over the fence about the camper. And started threatening the police. My brother and father went off on her, and then explained Dan was living in the camper so his son could have his bedroom. Well, the neighbor still wasn't happy, but stopped with the threats. My father talked to her husband later though, and he was bull mad at her. Then he apologized on her behalf, and said Dan was doing a good thing by giving up his room to his son. The neighbor husband also congratulated Dan on kicking out ex-sister-in-law, and said he was always afraid to mention it before. But she was just a horrid woman. We can all agree on that now. So yeah, the neighbors aren't a problem anymore. Dan and our father managed to get some money together on the side, and bought a slightly bigger camper to set up in our parents' backyard. We needed my truck just to move it. But we got it in there. It's basically the best Dan can do right now till the credit debts his ex piled up are paid off. And even then, he's got the future of his kids to plan for. He may be living in that camper for the next 10 years. But it's preferable to how it was when he was married. His ex-wife certainly can't and won't be contributing to college funds for the kids. Except maybe for her affair baby. Dan's camper is admittedly better than mine, and it's newer, bigger, and has its own bathroom. Mine does not. Although Dan never really uses said bathroom. It's basically become a closet since the toilet and shower are so tiny. If he needs to take a leak or something, he just goes in the house. Dan and I had a joking laugh about me being jealous he's got the better hobo house. And we bantered like sarcastic gentlemen about it. He's kitted out his camper with some better amenities. Like a flat-screen TV complete with streaming, video games and DVD. He said it feels like he really has his own place now. Even though he's just in the backyard. And he's much happier now that he's divorced. Dan tells me one day he'll get a truck too, just so he can move the camper on his own someday. But for now he's sticking with his minivan for the sake of his kids. So his camper is sitting pretty where it is, and mine is back in my backyard where it belongs. Though it's not gone unused. I temporarily rented it to a cousin who moved into the area for work. And they were only in the camper for about a month before finding their own apartment. Other than that, it serves as a guest house when needed. Relatives come by to use it when in town so as to not need a motel. My nephew has come over to stay in it a few times for fun as well. His sisters don't really have an interest. The camper is the closest he's ever been to camping. Same here sadly, because I didn't buy that camper to camp, but to live. As for my parents, they've gotten therapy. My mother got medicated for her mental problems and fully acknowledges her terrible past mistakes as a parent with all of the favoritism, as does my father. My father is still awkward around me, but he's been fairly active in his church and is working hard to rebuild the family reputation as best he can. And Dan has cut back on drinking a lot since he isn't so stressed out anymore. He's even taken up exercising. He's in pretty good shape now. And he told me his ex-wife saw the picture of him he posted online after shedding 20 pounds and called him to compliment. He didn't take the bait. As for the holidays, my parents, brother and nibblings all came to my Christmas Eve party last year, along with most of the other relatives who came the year prior. No problems at all, save for the fact none of them could stay the night in my spare rooms anymore since I rented them out. Both of my tenants were away seeing their own families too. Things went swimmingly. Not only was ex-sister-in-law not invited, she wouldn't have been able to crash the party anyway because of my restraining order against her. But she also barely made any attempt to spend time with her other kids either. She only bothered to see them twice a month at best. She didn't even send them any gifts for Christmas or birthdays since being outed as a cheater. And the kids were initially pretty upset about that. But now they just don't care. Ex-sister-in-law I guess decided she was gonna try to live like she was single again, despite having a baby at home. And it didn't go well because life gave her one hell of a cheese slap. On New Year's, ex-sister-in-law went out late to party like it was 1999, and she got pulled over by a cop on her way home. She got arrested for DUI, and her car was impounded. She called Dan while being arrested begging him to come get her car to keep it from going to impound. He told her he was not helping her, and she could deal with it herself. Dan has drunk and drove, so it was kinda little hypocritical. But this woman put him through so much, I don't blame him for rebuffing her. Some flying monkeys of ex-sister-in-laws called Dan to berate him for being a terrible person. Pretty sure this was the same woman who called me a while back. Dan had none of her shit, and went off on her with a long tirade about his ex's cheating. What happened in the divorce, and that he has no sympathy for his ex since she left him with mounds of credit card debt and she does nothing for their kids anymore. The flying monkey didn't call back. We still don't know who she was. But Dan said she sounded like a religious nut. Ex-sister-in-law went to court, and she pleaded guilty for the DUI. Dan found this out because she called him claiming that because of the DUI, she wouldn't be seeing her other kids anytime soon. She told him she was sentenced to take a 6-month DUI class, in which time her license is suspended until completion. And she won't be allowed to drink at all. Which is the part she was most upset about. I've heard of these classes before. They make you take regular and at times random urine tests, and when you finally get your license back, you have to have a camera and breathalyzer installed in your car for a year. Also increased insurance rates for the DUI on record. Ex-sister-in-law has not been having a fun time. But I have no pity for her. I don't drink and drive. Sadly, that's all the info I have on ex-sister-in-law, as she's kept minimal contact with Dan for some time now. And eventually, she'll probably stop contacting him altogether unless absolutely necessary. I don't know anything else about sister-in-law's parents, or her affair baby. Even Dan doesn't know. But I do still have a bit of info on someone else. Remember ex-sister-in-law's affair partner, the bronze-tongued lout? Well, he made his social media public again. And he doesn't seem to acknowledge the existence of ex-sister-in-law or his child at all. Dan tried to message him, and promptly got an immediate block. So the guy is just being an ass and acting like his shit doesn't stink. Whatever. His knocking up ex-sister-in-law got her out of the family anyway. So in a way, we're all thankful to that AP bastard. That's everything I have. And hopefully won't need to come back again. Unless my truck gets egged again next Halloween. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. I've silently followed your stories from the start. I'm happy to see how things have progressed since. While I know it's a long road until things are fully repaired, if ever, I am glad your parents have acknowledged what they did and are actively trying to fix it. Dan has stepped up and now you two can even banter, and the fact the kids enjoy you is wonderful. Honestly, I'm happiest to hear about your bond with the Nibblings. The fact that your nephew wants to come over to their uncle's house to camp is just wonderful. I hope Xil either wakes the hell up and shapes up for the kids, or she stays the hell away. Anyways, hopefully, the future is less drama and more happy times. Hopefully, I will not see a post from you again. And I mean that with the best of intentions. Commenter 2, this is as wholesome an ending as it can get. It's good to see a family dynamic being repaired. Kudos to your parents for doing the necessary work to realize how much damage they caused and to your brother for getting his life back on track. Commenter 3. I'm sorry your drama saga ended up being copied for entertainment. However, I am glad that things are improving for you, your parents, your brother, and your Nibblings. It sounds like the toxicity was your ex-Sil and it shows because with her gone life has gotten better for the rest of you. I feel sorry for all of the kids, but they might be better off in the future without her. Thank you for this update, which is hopefully the final one.
I discovered my so of 3 years was texting back and forth with another person every day and was sending nude photos to each other. A little bit of backstory. SO and I have been together for 4 years and about 2 years ago when the Rona hit, I moved in with him as we both lost our respective jobs and needed to save a bit from gas and utilities. Since then I have found a new office job and so takes some odd jobs online, but he basically stays at home most of the time. So has always been on the controlling side. He wanted me to cut all my male friends from my life. Hindsight is 20/20, I know, but in his defense, he also cut all contacts with women, or at least to my knowledge. So has always been very adamant that he doesn't condone cheating, and even if someone else in his life was a cheater, he would cut them out of his life. The relationship has had its ups and downs. We have had a fair share of arguments and a few months ago we hit a rough patch, but recently things were looking okay for a while. Or so I thought. So has become quite guarded with his phone lately, including hiding it if I look over his shoulder. He has never done this before and it's very not like him. I am very open with my personal tech items. He's always welcome to look through my phone and laptop because I have nothing to hide. We even know each other's phone passwords. My gut feeling kept telling me that something was wrong, so when I got up for work this morning while he was still sleeping, I admit, I shouldn't have done what I did. I took his phone from the nightstand and checked out his conversations. So has been chatting with a girl he met online, 25. I only skimmed through the last few messages as I didn't want him to wake up and catch me snooping, but they have been texting back and forth every day while I was at work and sending each other nudes. I was so shaken and disgusted. I don't know when it all started, but I assume it's been at least a month because that's when I first noticed the suspicious phone guarding behavior. Honestly, no matter how much I look for a solution, there's no coming back from this. I know I have to leave. I haven't confronted him yet because I don't want him to try and persuade me to stay or spin it that it's my fault. I also don't believe in closure, so there's really no use in telling him that I know. Here's where I need advice. I have a place to move to and I have to move all my stuff. I don't want to have him damage my stuff to spite me or something. He has a history of throwing my possessions when angry, so I'll have people come help me move when he's not in the house. We have separate finances, so that's not an issue. The problem is, we have a dog. I adopted him with his approval when I moved in with him. I'm saying it's technically my dog since I do 90% of the dog activities. He rarely takes him out and I buy all the dog toys and dog food. Basically, he's the fun parent that gets only the pets and hugs. I know he loves the dog and the dog loves him, but I don't think he'd be able to take care of him and get up at 6 a.m. to walk him. My baby is also too used to the house and us, and he'll probably be stressed out if I move him. Should I take the dog with me without telling my soon-to-be ex, or should I leave the dog with him? Another thing I need advice for is should I leave him a note or a message with any explanation? Update 1. First, I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my previous post. It really helped put things in perspective for me. A few people asked for an update. It will be a lengthy one, so brace yourselves. One particular comment stuck out to me, that my pet doesn't know what's best for them and they could roll in literal shit and be happy, which really solidified my decision. As a preface, I'd like to apologize. I was paranoid that I could be found out, so I altered a couple of details in the original, one of which was that we owned a cat, not a dog. However, I was still doing 90% of the caring for the cat. On to the update. After reading all the comments and making the decision to take the cat, I called my best friend, her boyfriend and my parents to tell them I'm breaking up and discuss logistics. I also told them to not mention anything in writing on the off chances that SO sees the messages. It took me quite some time to put everything in motion, 3 weeks to be precise, in which time I was doing my best to act like everything was okay while secretly moving some of my stuff to my parents' place to ease the final load. Finally, last Friday morning, my best friend, her boyfriend and my dad came. We loaded up everything on my father's truck and left. The whole ordeal took 1.5 HRS. I was honestly amazed how much stuff I managed to accumulate for just 2 years. I took everything that I paid for out of my pocket, including a monitor and a headset that I lent him due to his equipment breaking and he never bought new ones. The only thing I left was a queen-size bed I bought shortly after moving in. I also made sure to log into X's World of Warcraft account to cancel his subscription, which was paid from my bank account. I left a note on his desk that basically said, "Do not panic, you have not been robbed." I just took all my stuff and left. I'm taking the cat with me because I don't trust you to take care of her properly. Do not call me, my friends or my family. We have already had the talk, so there's nothing else to say. Have a nice life, your ex. I didn't tell him I knew about the cheating because at this point it was irrelevant. In retrospect, it was just the last straw on top of many other problems. But hindsight is always 20/20ths. I blocked his number and never looked back. Sure enough, he messaged me on WhatsApp as soon as he came back to the empty flat. The gist of the messages was that we could have done it the Civil War, LMAO, and why did I take the cat this way, we raised her together and he loved her. He also tried to call 3 times but gave up soon after. I then blocked him on WhatsApp as well. The next few days were pretty uneventful. Yesterday, he showed up at my workplace unannounced. I was pretty annoyed but didn't want to make a scene in front of the colleges, so I took a break and went out with him to the park across the street. Knowing him, he wouldn't just fuck off and leave me alone. He said he wanted closure and that I owed it to him after all these years. The conversation was mostly boring, so I'll highlight the important details. He said he wanted his monitor back and that he's willing to pay for it or trade me his new one, which is better, but wasn't with the same curve that he was used to. I told him that I like my monitor and tough luck. The best part is he went out, bought a new monitor, set it up to play WoW but realized that I also took the headset. He then asked his mother to buy him one and she bought headphones without a mic. Pity. He asked to have the cat back. He offered me money, offered me all his crypto savings and even offered me 60k gold in WoW LMAO. I told him some things can't be bought with money. He then asked to co-parent and when I said no to that too, he asked to at least say goodbye to her in person, also denied. I brought up that I'm the cat's primary caregiver and he can't even clean her shit. He replied he could, when push comes to shove, but didn't since I was doing those things anyway, despite him being in the flat almost 24/7. I also pointed out that if he really loved the cat that much, he'd want the best for her and to be with the one who takes care of her, instead of wanting to keep her for selfish reasons. He kind of agreed on that. The most baffling part, he offered to pay me to go grocery shopping together. We used to do that all the time when we were together. I pointed him to a couple of sites where he can buy groceries and have them delivered. He said it was too much work. I told him to adjust and evolve. He also apologized one too many times for hurting me, to which I replied every time I wasn't hurt, I was just disgusted and cringed at the conversations I read, to which he got offended and mumbled that it was private, you know. Not once did he mention the side chick, even then he didn't have the balls to admit to the affair. In their messages there was a recurring joke that if he comes to the hotel where she works, they'd have to fuck in the janitor's room. I brought her up a couple of times, told him I wish them both the very best and since I left him the bed, he doesn't have to worry about fucking in the janitor's room anymore. He asked to be friends multiple times. I told him, also multiple times, he betrayed me and he's a pathological liar and I don't want to be friends with a dishonest person. He legit couldn't comprehend how his dishonesty impacts a potential friendship. He said he wanted to tell me he wasn't committed to me anymore but couldn't bring himself to do that. I pointed out the hypocrisy of him blowing up at me for platonically talking to male friends online but he cheats the moment a semi-attractive woman comes his way. He said that a woman cheating on a man is the greatest sin but a man cheating on a woman is not so severe. What the actual fuck? The rest of the conversation was him trying to play buddy-buddy and talk to me about his life and me reminding him that I'm not interested in his life and that he's a closed chapter to me. After what seemed to be eternity, we said our, hopefully, final goodbyes and I went back to work. In conclusion, for the past week since I left, I've felt like a huge load have dropped off my shoulders. I have all the time in the world, I'm working on myself, I'm reconnecting with people I haven't talked to in years. I'm trying to live my best life and I don't regret anything. There were good times, there were bad times. It was a valuable experience and a lesson learned what to look for in a partner and, More importantly, what not to overlook. Huge thanks to everyone that commented on my post. You really gave me the push I needed to make what I hope is the right decision. Update 2. I was contemplating whether to write this last update or not. A bunch of things have happened since I last posted, and eventually, I figured we are all more or less people who laugh at their own farts and enjoy the occasional justice boner, so I decided y'all might appreciate how karma has caught up with X. Disclaimer and some background. I left out a lot of information in the original post and altered a lot of details to make sure X does not find the post and connect the dots. Our real ages are 28, him, 33, me, and 34, side chick. X and I were together for almost 7 years. Note 4. X had a chronic disease, nothing fatal if treated, very manageable, and a lot of people with the condition can work. He was of course using it as an excuse not to work, even online work, and mooch off me. We lived with his mother, who was supporting his narrative that he is too sick to work. X was abusive, first only verbally, but it progressed to physical abuse. I omitted most of this information in the first post because I wanted an unbiased opinion whether to take the cat or not. Even though the cheating was the last nail in the coffin of our relationship, I was actually contemplating leaving him for almost a year before the actual fact, and on occasions where he ramped up the abuse. I will withhold giving examples for the time being because the topic might be traumatic for some readers. My last update ended with my ex coming to work to offer me pixel money for my cat. This was in August 2022. I vacated his flat at the end of July. I thought everything was said and done and I would not hear from him again. Spoiler, I was wrong. Since the breakup, he has messaged me about every 3 months on Discord for various bullshit, like how he lost his best friend or asking for photos of the cat. I didn't block him there in case either of us needed to exchange items we forgot at our respective places. Sometime in March I found out by chance that he's still using my old League account. He has been banned on 3 different accounts for toxicity. I gave him the password while we were dating, but I did not think he would have the audacity to continue using it after we broke up. The kicker is, all it would take would be to ask me to use it and I would have no problems with it. It really rubbed me the wrong way that he could message me with his woe is me crap on 4 different occasions but conveniently forgot to mention that he is still playing on my account. I wondered for about a week whether to let it slide or to just change the password. Then he contacted me again about wanting to ask me something. I shot this down and reminded him that I explicitly told him not to contact me. He said okay. This lasted for a fortnight until he messaged me again, saying that he will ask his question regardless. I pointed out how I told him not to contact me and he could not respect even that. So he has learned nothing, as he still does not give a fuck about other people's boundaries. The question was, what did it feel like to be with a complete monster for 7 years? Why did you stay for so long? Apparently the lad was going through some kind of epiphany phase. There were a lot of crocodile tear-laced explanations that followed. The gist of it was that he was doing some reflections. He realized he is a complete lunatic and needs help and apologized for how he behaved. I also found out that he spent all his savings and disability money, including the crypto he offered me for the cat. So he could not take me up on the offer to buy my LOL account. Sag. Also, to nobody's surprise, his little affair did not work out. I did not ask for details, but what he said was, I think I finally met a person who is more sick and broken inside than me, which is quite an achievement. Few months prior to this revelation, a WoW friend from the side chick's country messaged me. For context, we are all Europeans and play on the same servers. Friend knew my side of the story, and when he found out that side chick is flying to my and ex's country, he put 2 and 2 together. He told me he does not expect much from their relationship since a year ago the chick was dating a mate of his, broke his heart and flew somewhere else for the next WoW guy that gave her attention. Knowing these facts, and after what my ex said, I mentioned to him how it was ironic that he cried cheating if I was 5 minutes late after work, but decided to involve himself with a woman who was practicing cheating as a sport. He agreed that it was quite ironic indeed and that he had to lay in the bed that he made, which was sort of mature on his part, I suppose. Also, did I mention he was too dumb to wire his own debit card to his WoW account? This is why he could not play anymore. Well, yeah, but I guess also because he lost his sugar mommy that was paying for it and failed to secure another. As for me, Kitty and I are thriving. I am active. I lost 12 kilograms since the breakup and I'm getting back in shape, even though I lost the excess weight the moment I dumped the ex. I have reconnected with most of my friends and apologized for not contacting them very much in the past 7 years and explained why. They were very understanding and things have gone very much to how they were before. I have also met the most decent, kind and compassionate man out there. So, life is looking good. Thank you for all the support, Reddit. Thank you for reading and have a great day. My church banned our youth worship leader for condemning Christian nationalism. The band plans to walk out during their next performance. My church's youth group has a youth band that leads worship during youth, but the church also has them lead worship on Sunday mornings every few weeks, to promote the youth band when the usual worship team has a week off. I'm not in the band, but I often help with lyric PowerPoints along with another girl, but not when the band plays on Sundays. The main singer of the youth band is the daughter of a youth assistant, and the daughter is an assistant too. We'll call her Emma, she's 20. I'm writing because of what happened the last time the youth band led Sunday worship on 6/30. That led to Emma and her family leaving the church. In between one of the songs, Emma said she felt led to say that Christian nationalism wasn't of God, because forcing people to believe went against the basis of Christianity because God gave free will and too many Christians forgot that. She also said there would be no short and narrow path if people were forced to walk it, before saying Project 2025 was advertised as Christian but resembled nothing of God, because God never forced people to believe in Him. No one confronted her or anything, as it was brief, and they played a few more songs along with the closing song after the pastor finished his sermon. But when we got to youth on Friday night, Emma and her mother weren't there. And we were later informed, by the youth pastor, that Emma and her mom would no longer be helping the youth before a bunch of stuff about giving others the chance to be lead singers because Emma had left the church. However, word got out from one of the band's players that Emma told the band that she got banned during the week and that her parents left the church with her, so they already knew before we found out at youth. The reason I'm making this post is because of a conversation I had with the band, and other PowerPoint girl, the same Friday the youth pastor announced it, and the conversation was private from the rest of the kids. Long story short, the band is upset about what happened to Emma, and they've been throwing around ideas on what to do. The one they're heavily considering is a walkout the next time they're scheduled to play on Sunday after playing the intro song. Service opens with an intro song before someone comes on stage to welcome everyone before worship continues, and they would voice support for Emma before walking out together. They haven't told anyone not associated with the band because they don't want anyone to spill the deets. But the main thing we're debating is repercussions from our parents and whether or not it's worth the risk. There's likely a few weeks until the band plays on Sunday again, and they still haven't decided on a new lead singer yet. I also want to add that the church didn't upload the worship portion of the service with Emma and only uploaded the sermon from that day. They always include worship on their YouTube upload of the service. Most of the concerns were around tuition punishments, as some of them have their parents helping pay, but they still want to do something. And while I'm not in the band technically, aside from coordinating PowerPoint lyrics occasionally, I figured the least I could do was get advice from other adults anonymously, because we don't want to ask our parents for obvious reasons, and maybe others could see more pros and cons that we can. I appreciate any advice that anyone gives and will relay it to the band too. Thanks to anyone who read this to edit. I forgot to add this detail in my post, but the pastor of our church has used the pulpit to speak politics in the past and has even mentioned support of a presidential candidate on numerous occasions, along with other political topics on occasion too, Roe v. Wade and gay rights. So while I agree that politics probably shouldn't be spoken in church, some of the band said that Emma was tired of the often political topics being brought up during sermons, thus why she said what she said. Comments from the first post. Comment 1, OP, I am not Christian, but standing up to the tyranny of Project 2025 is the most Christian thing I've heard. That sounds exactly like what you should be doing against something that represents hate and violence. Christian nationalism is why many people are starting to make fun of or roll their eyes at Christian values. Because from what we see, Christian nationalism is the exact opposite thing Jesus would want or support. I don't believe in him, but I do think God/Jesus would be proud of you. You sound like a good person. Comment 2, hey. I hope you see this despite all of the responses. I was raised Catholic. I consider myself otherwise now, but that is how I was raised, and I was an altar server and lead singer for Mass. I was very involved in my church. My priest was an amazing human being who never brought politics into service. He was so kind and so caring to everyone in the community. When I lost my faith, he was an amazing person to talk to, and he never shamed me. That being said, other people in the church hated this about him and became vocal about it. It was exactly this political behavior that made me turn away from the church in the first place. I thought it was horrible to mix politics and faith. I strongly disagreed with it and wanted no part in it. I started exploring the history of my faith and other faiths. I wanted to know why. Why were we trying to dictate people's lives, when Jesus told us not to? Why were we cruel to the poor and the sinful, when Jesus' message was to forgive? Why, when the church had so much wealth and power, did they wield that power like a club, forcing themselves onto the vulnerable and desperate? In the end, it is all about control. Whether you believe in God or not is one thing. But believing in the church is to believe in a man-made organization. Flawed people created these institutions, and like people, They are flawed too. A community organization has the power to uplift as much as it has the power to control and beat down. And that is what it all comes down to, doesn't it? Your friend could not be controlled. So they kicked her out. And now here comes the big question. Knowing all of this, can your conscience be at peace if you stay silent? When I was your age, I could not. Do what you believe is truly right, even if it's hard. Even if it's uncomfortable. You will always become better for it. Edit. Wow. Thanks for the awards, guys. And OP, if you see this, please update us. I would love to know how this update. I want to thank to everyone who commented on my original post because it was way more than I expected, and many of you had really helpful advice. This is a small update with some really surprising things that happened since. First, the band is still going through with the walkout, and they're keeping it within the band so that no other kids tell their parents who might tell leaders. It would have been awesome to include others, but the risk of the church catching wind was too great. Second, we have a date of 8 quarters when the youth band will do worship for the adults again. Third, the youth pastor appointed a singer from within the group who will take turns singing on Sundays with future participants in the coming weeks. Fourth, the new singer agreed that the church's handling of Emma was BS. Fifth and most exciting, 2 of the band members told non-religious relatives about the situation and fear of punishment, and they agreed to come to the service and let them head to their cars in the parking lot straight from the walkout, for safety. They won't leave the lot in case some parents try to claim kidnapping, but will be in their cars if all goes well, and the rest of us are going to ask our relatives too. Sixth, one of the band members told a teacher they knew from school who's thinking about coming and walking out too. And seventh, one of the band members wrote a little something that the lead singer will read before they walk off stage, and it would be great if anyone with editing experience could help to make it clearer or provide advice on what to add. They tried to keep it short. I will make a post about their write-up in the near future. Here's how we hope it happens. The band will play the opening song, which officially starts service, and usually lets people know it's starting. Many make their way from the foyer during the intro song. And after someone gives the welcome prayer after the opening song, the lead singer will then give the speech before the band walks off stage, and I will walk out with them from the pews along with relatives' friends. One relative said she might bring some people she knows too, which could make more of a statement to the church to see adults leaving too. One of the relatives will also record the whole thing in case any parents don't react well to it, and I will update after it happens. If anyone has any further advice, it would be appreciated and I'll bring it to the band. Most of the band, outside of 2 seniors, aren't old enough to vote this year, but this is a chance to stand up for what's right against something that is adamantly infusing itself into Christianity, Christian nationalism, and making Christianity lose all of its respect in our opinion. We don't expect change to happen in the church as a result of our walkout, but it's a small thing we can do to say we did our part when faced with it ourselves. Another commenter put it best when she asked if we'd be able to live with ourselves if we did nothing, and the answer has been no for us so far. I also want to add something I forgot to clarify in my first post. Emma didn't say what she did out of the blue. She'd been vocal about the pastor talking politics for some time according to the band, and I've seen much of it too. However, a lot of people sent DMs disagreeing with the band's decision. So before I get into it, I want to give specifics of what the pastor has done. The pastor mentioned Trump from the pulpit numerous times, including the aftermath of the 2020 election, to voice discontent over the results. He has also celebrated Roe v. Wade's overturning from the pulpit, Pride Month during June, and even compared Trump's legal trial to how Jesus was persecuted leading up to his crucifixion. Things that have no place being vented about from the pulpit, and this has happened over the course of a few years. I received a few DMs in the aftermath of my first post, and some were encouraging while others not so much. A few people, who said they were Christians, said that Emma was wrong to use the microphone to hijack the service, with her words, because she should have talked to the pastor first, while calling her actions immature. However, when I showed the band the advice from my posts, I also told them about the DMs, and they said that Emma spoke to a leader about the pastor's political sermons in the past. But nothing came from it as he continued to speak politics from the pulpit frequently. Some people also said that our walkout wasn't godly, because we, like Emma, would be hijacking the service for a publicity stunt when church was supposed to be about God. Some people called us immature among harsher things, but we disagree for 2 reasons. First, who is supposed to call out the misuse of the pulpit if not people who attend the same church where it's misused? A few DMs said to do nothing and pray for God to change the pastor's heart, but he's been doing this for years. And second, the Bible gives guidance on how to call out improper behavior in the church in Matthew 18:15, 17. Dealing with sin in the church. 15. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the 2 of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. 16. But if they will not listen, take 1 or 2 others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. 17. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan, or a tax collector. Emma has already talked to a leader one-on-one, and the band has voiced displeasure about Emma's ban to the youth pastor, only for him to disagree and say that Emma was out of line. Regarding the part about, tell it to the church, I suppose the how might be up to interpretation. Maybe telling the church means telling a church leader instead of the congregation on stage. But Emma and the band have talked to various leaders, including an elder too, aside from our youth leader, only for years of political rants from the pulpit to continue. When Jesus flipped tables in Matthew 21:12, we believe he did it because people were using the temple to sell things that had nothing to do with God, and we believe that politics falls into the same boat. Someone commented a link in the comments of my first post that I never saw. But I showed the band, and we couldn't agree more. Pastor Loran Livingston talked about the role of politics in the church and how politics shouldn't be combined with Christianity. I still plan to speak with my parents ahead of 8 quarters, and I'll share the write-up the band is working on really soon. I really appreciate everyone who commented too. Lastly, I want to clarify that the walkout is the band's decision entirely. I am not a member of the band, I just do PowerPoint lyrics during youth, and I'm not even in the band's group chat with Emma. As some of the band members are contemplating punishments from parents, 2 seniors who are concerned with their parents removing tuition help. I will support whatever they decide while understanding that they have to take care of their future too, as many commented. If they decide to continue with the walkout, I will support them and walk out from the pews. But if they change their mind because the repercussions are too great, I will respect that and continue to support them. Comments from the update. Comment 1, my views on religion and churches are a whole other thing. I'm impressed by the conviction to your sense of right and wrong and your need to not sit by while someone spews falsehoods from their platform, a platform which Christians will claim is supposedly a place from which love and truth emanate. Much respect to you and yours. Those telling you to pray on it and that it isn't your place are cowards. Being afraid to rock the boat is how religions get twisted. It sounds like your church is well down the slippery slope of becoming a cult to a guy who, when asked about his favorite Bible verse, responded vaguely, like he hasn't read the book. OP. I was a little surprised when a few of the people who called themselves Christians in the DMs even used profanity against my first post, but change doesn't happen unless it's addressed, and it's not like Emma and the others haven't addressed it with numerous leaders over the years. Comment 2. It is worth remembering that the original idea behind separating church and state was to protect religion from being tarnished by politics. The underlying idea was that religion is a garden that must be protected from the wilderness of the world. This church seems to be a prime example of that necessity. Comment 3. I have a lot of respect for all of you for taking this stand. Christian nationalism has no place in the church. It is completely against the teachings of the Bible. Stand strong in what you are undertaking. You are biblically grounded in your stand. The church was given its mission by Jesus, to preach the good news in order to bring people to Christ. The church is not, nor should it ever be, a mouthpiece for politics. I will keep all of you in my prayers. You are doing the right thing, even though it may feel scary. Standing up against power is never easy. Comment 4. Hey, Christian over here. First, I love that you have biblical references for what you guys are doing. Second, the idea of comparing Trump to Jesus no matter the political views of yourself or the pastor is quite honestly blasphemous, so you're 100% doing the right thing. And third, you might not be old enough to vote yet, but here's the thing, if you have conviction about anything, get passionate. In this case, get mad, rock the boat and use your voice. It's what we're called to do. Will it be difficult and scary sometimes? Yeah, absolutely, but things that matter often are. So what I'm saying is you kids absolutely rock. You're far better examples of Christ-like behavior than your pastor is giving out right now, and mad respect for that. Remember Joshua 1:9 and God's command, as you kids do this, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. My ex-girlfriend claims my current girlfriend manipulated her into ending our 4-year relationship. Am I the asshole? I, 28 years old, am really confused about the events of the last month. My ex-girlfriend Julie, 29 years old, thinks that my current girlfriend Mindy, 28 years old, is manipulative and sabotaged our 4-year relationship. I was in a loving relationship with Julie for the last 4 years. We met through some mutual friends. Julie and I were very compatible in terms of our love for outdoor activities and running. We have very similar lifestyles and supported each other well for the last 4 years. We have also been living together for the last 3 years. We even discussed getting married during the summer. Everything was great and I was planning to propose to her over the holidays. However, I started to see changes in behavior in Julie around September. She was acting distant and looked stressed. It was quite noticeable and I was worried. I trust her with all my heart and I could not imagine she would be cheating on me. However, she did spend more time by herself. Around the same time, Julie's friend Mindy messaged me privately and asked me if I could meet her secretly, as she wanted to tell me something about Julie. Mindy and Julie work together and I've known Mindy ever since I started dating Julie. I was surprised, but to be honest, I assumed the worst. I met her at a cafe after work. She asked me if things were going on between Julie and me. She told me that Julie told her that she was planning to leave me soon. This was a total shock to me. I asked her if there was anyone else that Julie was interested in and she told me no. Julie confided in her that she was not sure about marrying me. She told me she just had to tell me this as she did not want me to be blindsided. I was devastated. I started putting more effort into making our relationship more exciting and planning more dates, etc. Mindy was also helping me through this time, and telling me more about what Julie told her. Eventually, before Thanksgiving, Julie told me that she loved me, but she wanted to take a break for a month to live alone. She said that she just wanted to live alone for a month to make sure she wanted to marry me. I was completely heartbroken. I asked her if she wanted to pursue someone else. She told me that was not the case, and I better not do anything stupid either. She loves me with all her heart, but she just wants to stay away from me to make sure that she is marrying me for love, and not because she is used to being with me. I did not understand that at all. I told her that if she is not sure after 4 years, if she wants to marry me, then maybe we should just break up. We had a big fight and broke up after a few days. As our lease was ending, we decided to part ways in December. She got a new apartment and I kept our old apartment and just took her name off the lease. After the breakup, I was feeling very lonely, as I was not used to being in the apartment alone. I didn't want to keep on being sad and hence invited a bunch of friends for a New Year's party. I also invited Mindy. We had a good time, and my friends were doing their best to cheer me up. Mindy also mingled with my friends and it was good. Mindy decided to stay back to help me clean up and we hooked up that night. I felt guilty, but Mindy did cheer me up. Since then, we have hung out almost daily at my place. I am still sad about Julie, but I won't lie that being with Mindy does make me feel happy. She is sweet and caring. Last Sunday, we woke up and someone was banging on the door. I went to open it and it was Julie. She looked furious and started yelling at me. She kept on accusing me of cheating on her. I told her I most certainly did not cheat on her, and she was the one who broke up with me. Mindy was also at my apartment. Julie was just angry at both of us. She started calling Mindy a manipulative bitch and told me that Mindy was the one who suggested to her that she should take some time away from me to understand her true feelings. I calmed her down and asked her to explain herself. She told me that ever since our marriage talk, she told Mindy about it and Mindy kept on asking Julie if she was sure about marrying me. Mindy suggested she take some time to herself to understand her true feelings and that I will understand and give her space. When I said no, Mindy convinced her that I was so controlling that I could not even give her 1 month to herself and convinced her to break up with me. Mindy told me that she did not say any such things, and these were all Julie's ideas and she was just there during these conversations. She did tell Julie that she told me about some of the things so that I get a chance to make things right with her over the last few months. That made Julie more angry and she started accusing me of emotionally cheating on her. Julie told me that the last few weeks have made her realize that we were meant to be together, but she now cannot believe I could move on from a 4-year relationship in a week. On one hand, I want to believe Julie, but she broke up with me for no fault of my own. Mindy was there for me when I was down, but now I also doubt her. She suddenly started talking to me out of the blue as we were never really close before, and immediately became my support after the breakup although Julie was her close friend. Am I the to emotionally cheat on Julie? Should I have told her about Mindy's texts? Should I have not moved on from her so quickly, even though Julie broke up with me? I was just hurting and Mindy was right there to support me. I need advice from someone with a clear mind on what the fuck is going on. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Sounds like you and Julie need to talk privately and discuss what Mindy said to each of you. As others said, this sounds all too convenient. Mindy was in both of your ears telling you both what she wanted you to hear to orchestrate this whole thing. Please reach out to Julie and ask her to talk to you alone. Even if you both don't get back together, I'm sure you care for each other deeply and she would want you to be with someone who cares about you and won't manipulate you, and her. Her manipulation of you is more direct but Julie is the victim as well. OP, you are right. If Julie is right, I just threw a 4-year relationship under the bus in 2 weeks. Comment 2. So what's your reason for sleeping with your ex's good friend weeks after the breakup? It's understandable you wanted to move on, but why her? OP. I was not planning on it. But she just stayed back after the party and things happened. Did I feel guilty after that? Yes. I felt discarded and unwanted after a 4-year relationship and was not thinking straight. Update 1, 28, posted last week regarding my girlfriend Julie, 29, accusing her friend and co-worker Mindy, 28, of sabotaging our relationship. Julie broke up with me in December after a 4-year relationship and Mindy reached out to me when I was feeling down. However, when Julie realized Mindy was talking to me, she confronted both of us last Sunday morning and told me that Mindy manipulated her to break up with me. The worst part was I was not thinking straight after the breakup and ended up hooking up with Mindy after a New Year's party. After the incident, I asked Mindy if I needed some time and did not meet her. Since then I made the following post on Reddit and had 3,000 people call me an idiot. I am sorry for the long post, but I wanted to say that we were not idiots to not see what happened. You guys read an abridged version of events in 5 minutes, while we lived it for the last 7 months. I messaged Julie every day since then, to try and talk to her. She did not reply to my messages. I was not sure if she blocked me. Mindy was constantly trying to message me, asking if we could meet and talk about it. On Wednesday, one day after posting, I decided to message Mindy. I told her to tell me everything she said to Julie truthfully. I told her I would go and see if I found out that she was lying. Mindy wanted to meet me in person or talk to me on the phone, but I wanted everything in writing. She messaged me that Julie always said good things about me for all these years. When Julie told her about us talking about getting married in 2024, she was happy for both of us. However, Julie started telling her that she had cold feet and was not sure if she wanted to marry me because of issues she observed about her parents' marriage. One day Julie told her she wanted to take a break from me. She was not sure about her true feelings for me. That was the time Mindy told me about Julie's behavior, as she felt bad for me, as we were already telling our families about the engagement plans. After our fight, she said that Julie was extremely upset and told Mindy that she would never marry me. She said that the only reason Julie came back was when she heard that I was moving on, as she is jealous of us. She also said that I was a good guy, and hopefully, I see that what we have is something special. I just said okay and told her I needed time. I kept on messaging Julie once a day to at least talk to her once. It was heartbreaking to think that she may have blocked me and may never talk to me again. On Friday afternoon, Julie finally replied. She said she wanted to meet me and told me she would come to our apartment on Saturday afternoon. I cleaned the place up and was just feeling deep guilt from inside before facing her. When she came in, she looked like a shell of herself and completely broken. I sat on our sofa, but she chose to sit away from me. We asked how we both were, but it was clear that none of us were doing well. I started apologizing, but she stopped me. She asked me to let her finish and not to interrupt her. She had brought her little notebook and had written down things she wanted to say to me. She told me that she truly loved me. But after we discussed getting married, she started feeling scared of the next big step. She thought those feelings were normal and would go away. So she decided to not discuss her concerns with me. It kept on eating her from inside, and she made a mistake to talk to Mindy about them. She said that she wanted to say everything to me now, so I don't get secondhand information about why she was distant and broke up with me. She said that her parents had a very rocky marriage, though they were together until her mom passed away in 2021 during the pandemic. Her parents argued constantly, and she always thought her mom did not love her dad. However, her mom was extremely dependent on him for everything, and her dad knew it and hence didn't treat her well. She never wanted to be like her mom after the marriage. However, as we lived together, she started seeing some of those issues in our relationship. For example, when we met, Julie had a lot of credit card debt and was bad at managing her money. I helped her with that. Even though we have separate finances, I ended up managing all her finances, investments, etc. At her request, to the point that she did not know or understand where her money exactly was. She also said that we always enjoy making nice meals for dinner every day. However, whenever I work late, she completely loses any motivation to cook and ends up eating cheese and crackers like a toddler for dinner. She also complained that in the last 4 years of our relationship, I have never said no to her for buying anything. She feels that I coddle her, and she just got comfortable with all the luxuries and things I can provide for her. She talked about this with Mindy, and while Mindy initially just listened to her, she told her around September that one of her cousins also had the same issue. She decided to stay away from her fiancé for a month, and within a week, she realized how much she missed him and never had doubts again. When Julie asked for a break, all she wanted to do was to live with her best friend for a few weeks, to see if she was just too codependent on me. She knew I was planning to propose during our Christmas trip to my parents' house, and when I told her that she could not take a break, she just freaked out and broke up with me, as she did not want to be engaged without knowing for sure that we won't end up like her parents. After this, she asked me when I started meeting Mindy, and how many times we met. I opened my chat messages with Mindy and handed her the phone. I told her I met Mindy only once in September, where she told me that Julie wanted to break up with me because she was not happy with our relationship. I already had noticed Julie's distant behavior, and when I asked her, the only answer I got was, "I am fine, we are fine." Due to my insecurities, I tried to hold on to Julie and started coddling her more, planning more expensive dates, and trying to spend more time at home. When Julie asked me for a break and to stay away from me for a few weeks, I thought that was the final step before the breakup and broke down and fought with her, which led to our breakup and her moving out. At this point, Julie's voice started cracking up. She asked me when Mindy contacted you after the breakup. I pointed her to the messages. Mindy initially just started sending me memes to cheer me up, and I just used to respond with thanks, or a thumbs up. However, the messages started getting more frequent and she offered to talk to me in case I needed help. She asked me what I was doing for Christmas and New Year's, and when I told her I was inviting a few friends, she told me that she does not have any plans for New Year's, and I invited her. Julie stopped me there. She told me she did not need to hear the details after that. She told me that when she moved out of our house after our fight, she thought she was just not ready to get married to me. She stayed with her friend for 2 weeks and then got her new apartment in January. She told me that she was miserable and missed me badly. It became more acute when she moved into the apartment alone and could not stay there for even one night. Her best friend is currently staying with her in the new apartment. She realized she could not live without me within a week of living there. When she asked one of our mutual friends, on Saturday, about how I was doing, she told her about the party and told her Mindy was there. It did not make sense to her why Mindy would be at the party. She concluded that Mindy and I were having an affair during our relationship, and that was the reason Mindy must have tried to break us apart, by constantly telling her that she should not get married if she had doubts. When she saw Mindy in our apartment on Sunday, she completely broke down. However, when she learned that Mindy was also talking to me and telling me the opposite things, she realized how naive she was to throw everything away without properly talking to me first. As hurt as she is seeing me with Mindy, she also does not want to lose me. She kept on calling herself an idiot and apologizing for not telling her concerns to me sooner. I sat next to her and tried to hug her, but she moved away. She asked me if I was willing to still be together, and I told her I would give anything to get her back. She told me she was also willing to forget what happened, but she had a few conditions. Her first condition was that I cut contact with Mindy. I block her everywhere and never contact her again. If I see her standing in front of me, I act as if she is invisible. I was okay with that. Secondly, she has already signed up for individual therapy and is on the waitlist. She wants us to do couples therapy so that we can talk about all the concerns we have and work through them. We also decided to hold off our engagement or marriage until we both can get into couples therapy. I was also okay with that too. Finally, she wanted me to forget the last month as a bad nightmare and never talk about it again. And if I ever make a "we were on a break" joke, she will punch me in the face. This was the first time we both smiled. I asked her what she was going to do about Mindy as they worked together. She said the biggest punishment for Mindy is to know that she did not succeed in breaking us up. She wants Mindy to see how happy she is with me. She wants Mindy to be there when she flaunts her engagement ring in the office and gets jealous when we get married. We hugged and I felt so relieved that I had a chance to make things right for her. I asked her to stay and she agreed. The rest of the evening was nice. We ordered DoorDash and watched reruns of Top Chef while cuddling on our couch. In the morning, we discussed moving back together. I want her to move back to our old apartment, but she wants a fresh start and asked me if I'm willing to move into her new apartment. Her new apartment is tiny compared to our current apartment and also not in the best neighborhood, but we will talk about it more and decide. I also will have to deal with the issue of having two 12-month leases, and how to get out of one of them. Currently, Julie went to her apartment after lunch to get some of her stuff for the week and I am writing this post. I am just so lucky that I did not lose Julie despite my terrible actions during the last month. I just hope that I will be able to work things out and get married soon, and this whole incident is a small bump in our perfect relationship. I also don't know how to address the issue where she feels coddled by my behavior and feels like I'm making her codependent on me. It's just my personality and I need to work on that during couples therapy. However, any tips from you guys are welcome on how to make her feel less codependent. P.S. Thanks to everyone who checked on my health during the last few days via direct messages, and sent me numbers for helplines. Don't worry, I am a marathon runner, And don't give up that easily. Relevant comments. Comment 1. So what happened to Mindy? OP, no idea. As far as I'm concerned, she does not exist. Comment 2. So it was Mindy who suggested to Julie to take the break? OP, yes. Mindy told Julie that she should take a break, and at the same time told me Julie wanted to break up with me because she was unhappy with me. I thought a break meant she wanted to move away and I would never see her again if I said yes. Comment 3. I don't know how you can make someone who can't even stay alone in their apartment less codependent. She needs her own therapist to make that happen, or she will again blame you for making her that way. OP, yes, she is looking for one right now. I have been in therapy and it takes time to find the right therapist that helps you. At least now we have discussed the issue, so it will be easier for us to see the signs and work on them together. New update. I wrote a few posts 6 months ago regarding breaking up with my then fiancée Julie because she asked me for a break and then hooking up with her friend Mindy. It turned out that Mindy was the one who encouraged Julie to ask me for a break and also befriended me and told me about Julie's intentions in advance. They were the worst few weeks of my life, but Julie and I reconciled and got back together. A lot of you have been asking me for an update, and I feel this is a good time to give a final update. After the incident, Julie told me that she wants to get back together and forget about the whole thing, but I could see that she was still hurt by my behavior. I tried to not love bomb her and give her space as that was the reason why we broke up in the first place. Julie had a mental breakdown, and had a panic attack, during the week after she saw Mindy with me in our apartment. She got an online therapist who she still sees once a week. We also looked for couples counseling and were able to see one almost a month after the incident. We decided to put our plans for marriage on hold until then. I could feel that Julie was making a lot of effort to act normally, but something was not right. I was optimistic about us, but it was hard to see her suffer because of my actions. During our first couples counseling session, we both opened up about our relationship and talked about the incident. Julie apologized to me for not communicating what was in her mind and how bad she felt for putting me through all the drama. She told me that she did not know how to process her thoughts and did not want to unload all her negative feelings on me and panicked in the moment. I also apologized to her about everything, and at one point we were in competition on who gets to take a bigger blame for what happened. There were a lot of tears, and I found the experience very healing. The counselor told us that she could see how much we love each other and should take baby steps towards talking to each other about what is in our mind. She gave us some exercises to do after going home and discussing certain things. By the time we left her office, I was so sure that I wanted to spend my life with Julie. I told her that, and she also said that she cannot imagine a life without me. We decided to go ahead with our wedding plans. Mindy tried to contact me several times. She messaged me, but Julie blocked her on my phone and all socials. She also contacted Julie and sent some nasty messages to her. The worst was 15 days after the incident, when Mindy started posting pictures of me and her on Instagram every day. Some of those photos were intimate, non-nude, and it caused a lot of pain to Julie. Julie reported her to HR and got a transfer, and promotion, to a different department after a month. The last I heard from Mindy was when she sent me a long email on my work email, but I deleted it without reading. The photos Mindy posted did cause a lot of drama, and we had to explain to our parents and friends about what happened during that time. As you all may have guessed, I was unanimously nominated for the Idiot of the Year award, but I am sure my sister would give me a good run for it before the year ends. The whole issue lasted for a month, and then we never heard from Mindy again and just moved on with our lives. Julie has been talking to her therapist about her codependency issues and concerns. I think it's childhood trauma, and the therapist feels that it might have amplified after her mother's sudden death. I have been trying to help Julie slowly take interest in our finances, recommend Ramit Sethi podcast, but she is allergic to money talks and always changes the subject. I was able to break the lease that Julie signed by paying some penalty, and we stayed in our old apartment. However, Julie wanted to move out of it as soon as possible because of the bad memories. We purchased a single-family home a few months ago in a nice suburb and moved there in May. I don't think that issue of codependency is resolved and probably may have increased after the incident, but I love her, will always be there for her when she needs me. On to the main update. Julie and I got married last Saturday in a nice intimate ceremony held at my father's country club. All our family and friends were present, and I could not have asked for a better evening. I wish I could share photos of Julie in her wedding dress because she looked stunning. We plan to leave for our honeymoon next week, and I could not have been happier about how things turned out. Hopefully, in 25 years, Julie and I would look back at this incident as a small blip in our perfect life. Relevant comments. Comment 1, looks like a happy update after all. Make sure to keep communicating about any issues either of you might have, And don't be afraid to go back to counseling if it's needed. OP, thanks. We did attend couples counseling for 2 more sessions and it was good to talk through our expectations about each other. I know not everyone needs it but would highly recommend it to any couple getting married. Comment 2. I'm sorry, how are you the idiot for her leaving you because her BFF got into her head? Also, how is your sister trying to take away your championship belt? OP, I feel like an idiot because I should have taken some time before moving on to the next girl willing to be with me. Julie and I were in a relationship for 4 years and I almost threw everything away in 15 days. I feel if you read the first post in isolation and the 3K plus comments, you would also see why I am an idiot here. My sister is a goofball. I am sure she will do something more stupid before the end of the year. There is no way in hell I will win that title when she is around. My girlfriend said she was with a friend, but that same friend was with me choosing an engagement ring. How do I address her lie? God, this is a doozy. I swear my life feels like a movie right now. Sorry for the weird formatting. I'm on mobile and this is my first time posting on a sub like this. I, 28M, am planning on proposing to my girlfriend of 3 years, 26F. Now, I suck at picking out jewelry. I'm the type of guy that doesn't see a problem with heart-shaped jewelry. Seriously, why is it considered so ugly? So every time I want to buy something for my girl, I usually consult one of our mutual friends. My girl's best friends are all friends with me as well and we all get along well, so asking them for help picking out jewelry is something I'm used to. When it came time to pick out a ring, I consulted my girlfriend's best friend Justine, fake name. Justine and I are quite close and she knows my girlfriend better than anyone, including me. So when my girlfriend went out to visit her sister and baby nephew, I invited Justine over to the house to help pick out a ring. Justine and I looked through a few catalogs, but decided it was a dead end and it would be better to go to professionals at a jewelry store. However, I didn't know when my girlfriend would be coming home, so Justine and I thought of a clever text to gauge how much time we had. I asked her when she'd be coming home, as I was ordering takeout and wanted to know when to tell them to have the food ready by. She responded by saying it would be a few hours. She met up with Justine to go shopping. Now, obviously this took me by surprise since Justine was standing inside my house. I showed Justine the text and she looked as confused as I was. It isn't out of the ordinary for my girlfriend to meet up with people out of the blue like that for shopping, lunch, etc. She's a very spontaneous person and loves making plans on the fly. So ordinarily, I would have believed this text in a heartbeat. However, obviously this had to be a lie. When she came home she acted completely normal, and I played along, but it's been really hard to act like everything's fine. We got takeout, ate together and cuddled on the couch after. So far she's caught on a little something that is upsetting me, but I just can't tell her what. Looking at her kills me. I don't know what to do. My girlfriend and I have zero trust issues and we tell each other everything, so this lie is killing me. I want to ask her about it so badly, but if I tell her I knew she was lying, I'd have to explain why and I really don't want to do that. What should I do? I know she lied to me but I don't know how to confront her about it. Should I just forget it? This won't stop gnawing at me. Please help. Edit. I'm sorry for the lack of responses, it's been a hectic day and there's a lot of comments. Thank you to everyone who has commented so far, I appreciate them all. Edit 2, sorry again for the lack of responses guys, it's really been a crazy day. My parents are moving and I've been helping them. Also, I've never experienced this many comments on a post in my life. I'm going to talk to her tonight once we're both finally settled in after such a busy day and I will update tomorrow. Update. Hey guys. Oh my god, where to begin? My last post got way more attention than I could have ever imagined. Suffice to say, it was a tad bit overwhelming. Seriously, the amount of people begging for an update was a bit dehumanizing in a way. Like I wasn't a person going through something, but more so a story. But I understand, haha. I just want to say thank you so much for all of the support and wonderful comments. I got a lot of great advice that helped me tackle the issue head on. I also got a lot of really kind comments and messages. It was awesome. I also got a lot of comments that made me realize how toxic this sub can be. There were many comments that just said things like, she's cheating, it's over, and don't even confront her, just leave. It's advice like that that can ruin relationships that just need a little work. And thank you to the people that told me to hit my girlfriend, told me I was an embarrassment to my gender, and best of all, told me I should encourage an affair because it would lead to great experiences for me later in life. You gave me a good chuckle. On to the update. I decided to confront my girlfriend. I thought about using some of the lies people suggested, but they just wouldn't make sense. To say I ran into Justine somewhere. Well, I told my girl I had to stay home and do stuff around the house, and that's why I couldn't go with her to see my style. To say Justine was helping me pick out jewelry. It doesn't make sense for her to come all the way to our house to help me pick out a piece of jewelry unless it was a serious piece of jewelry. Like an engagement ring. If I just wanted to get her a piece of jewelry as a gift, I'd ask her friends for suggestions or ask them to send me pictures of jewelry she might like. It all happens over text. None of the excuses made sense. So I decided to be honest. I basically just said that I knew we'd been thinking about marriage and she probably knew a proposal was coming soon, so I invited Justine over to help me find her the perfect ring, and that so happened to be the day that she said she was going to see her. So, what's the deal? She immediately started grinning like an idiot and prodding me about proposing and the ring, but then we got back onto the topic of where she was and she confessed what she was really doing. No, she wasn't cheating, and no, she wasn't picking out a ring for me. The amount of times that was commented was crazy. So some people are dog people and some people are cat people. Well, me, I'm a snake person. I grew up with snakes my whole life, but I never felt I was able to get one because my girlfriend has always been uneasy about living with a snake, which I completely respected. Also, the process of buying and raising a snake is very different from that of buying and raising a dog or cat. It's quite complicated. So you could imagine my surprise when my girlfriend showed me a picture of her holding the cutest Kenyan sand boa I've ever seen. Needless to say, my girlfriend was going to surprise me with a snake. We're picking her up next week. Let me know if you want a pet tax. She's so cute. I definitely did not expect this, and I feel bad for ruining the surprise, but oh well. Life is good. Sorry if this isn't the ending you guys wanted or expected, just a snake. My boyfriend quit his job without telling me, and now he refuses to look for another job. I'm tired of paying for everything. My boyfriend, 33M, quit his job last year without telling me. I only found out 2 days before the rent was due. We split everything 50/50ths, when I asked him for his part of the rent. When I asked, he simply told me he quit because he was tired of working at that place. Since then, I've been paying for everything. Including rent, food, gas, bills, and anything he needs. I had to work 2 jobs while going to school for a while. It was hard. But I finally finished school a couple months ago and I found my dream job. I make enough to live comfortably, even take care of my BF and still have money for saving. However, I still want him to get a job to support himself because I think as an adult, he needs a job. But I feel like he relies on me too much and he thinks since my job pays well, he doesn't have any reason to work. He always says things like, "You make good money now, so maybe you could buy me my dream car." Or, "You should open a business for me to run." It bothers me a lot. I don't mind supporting my partner financially if there's a legit reason that prevents him from working, but it's not the case. He spends most of his time playing games, meeting up with friends, or just at home watching movies. I still have to do all the chores and take care of our dogs. His family thinks that he's been working to take care of me so that I can finish school, which is not true. Now they think I was able to finish school and got a good job all because of him. I don't even want to explain to them. I just want him to get a job and have a future. When I tried to talk to him, he told me I'm not supportive, and now that I have a good job, I look down on him. What should I do? Is it even worth it to try to talk some sense into him? I don't want to start dating at this age, but I feel like I can't keep doing this. Edit. Many people have asked why him. Why did I stay for years? What did I see in him? So I just want to answer it here. We started off pretty normal. We split everything 50/50ths, and I had no problem with that. But throughout the years, he started showing his true self. I was in school and school was the most important thing to me at that point, so I invested all my time and energy into it. I was in a PhD program, so I had stipend, around 30K/YR, which was enough for myself but not for 2 people. After he quit his job, I was very stressed out, but I had to focus on school and tried to do everything I could to survive. I didn't have time to really think about my personal life, and I also didn't want to go through any changes in life, so I just let it be. In addition, he guilt trips me a lot, so I feel bad for him. But now that I have a stable job, I have time to really think about my future. I don't see myself being with him long term. I don't think it would be as easy as, "Hey, let's break up," because I know he wouldn't let it go that easy. But I'll start planning to get out, maybe ask some friends for support. His name is not on the lease, so I'll stay where I am and he'll have to move. Relevant comments. Comment 1. You worked 2 jobs while in school to support someone who happily sits on their ass not contributing. Not even cleaning or caring for the pets. Why? Why have you accepted this? And the worst part is he lets his family think that he's supporting you. So he actually has enough sense to know that what he's doing is frowned up. You don't want to start dating at this age. You mean 31? So you'd rather be 31 taking care of a stay-at-home boyfriend who contributes literally nothing. How is that a better outlook at 31? OP's reply, I think it's because I was too busy figuring my life out and trying to do everything I could to survive. All I did was work and go to school. I didn't really have time to think about my personal life. Now that I have a stable job, I have time to think about my life more and more. I need to end this and take care of myself. TBH, I'm not even sure how to date anymore, but I guess I'll try and hopefully able to find someone. I will have a talk with him this afternoon to tell him it's time to end things and he needs to move out. He will probably give me the "my life is miserable" talk, again. But I think reading all these comments makes me realize I should feel bad for myself and not for him. I'm sure once he moves back to live with his family, they will reach out to me to tell me how good he has been treating me, and how he helped me through school. They've done this before when I told them things weren't working for us. I will tell them everything this time. Comment 2. You were in a PhD program. You are intellectually smart, apply that to your emotional and financial intelligence. If you were a classmate when this happened, I can tell you the other grad students would ask why you were still with him after a grace period of a couple of months. Leave and rebuild your life. OP's reply. I haven't told any of my family and friends about the situation because I'm kinda ashamed of it. My friends would probably think I can't be this stupid. But 2 of my very close friends did tell me that I deserve better, just based on the way he treats me in front of them. I will have a talk with him this afternoon, and a couple of my friends will be waiting outside, in case he gets physical or refuses to leave. Wish me luck. Update 1. It's been 2 months since I posted about my situation on this sub, and I just want to give you an update of how things went after I made that post. Before I go into the details, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone here. After I resolved everything, I occasionally would go back to my original post and read the comments to remind myself that I've done the right thing. After posting on here, I went home from work that day and asked my friends to come over but stay in the parking lot while I sort things out with my now ex-BF. Before I could even start the conversation, he told me his friend got a new car recently and how I should get him a car since I can afford it. I got really upset and told him he could have got himself a car if he was working. I told him how stressful it has been for me with him not working and fully relying on me. He started the "my life is already miserable and you're not being supportive" talk. I was sick of it. So I said I wanted to end things here and he needs to move out ASAP. As expected, he got upset and threw a tantrum. He was yelling, throwing stuff around, and when he realized I was being dead serious, he started threatening to hit and kill my dogs. I jumped in between him and the dogs to stop him from harming them. Then he pushed me and grabbed me by my neck. I was able to get him off of me, put the dogs into a room, and called my friends to tell them to come in and call the police. He was trying to hit me but my friends got there in time. I think he got scared when he saw my friends showed up, so he backed down but still verbally told them to get out of the way or he would hit them too. The police came. They took him away and told me he wouldn't be able to come into the apartment anymore. He had to move but would need to be escorted by the police if he wanted to grab his stuff later. It was a horrible experience, but it showed me that I've done the right thing. I thought that was the end of everything. But his auntie called me when she found out, and tried to gaslight me saying that he didn't do anything wrong and I was just upset, so I called the police. I told myself that I no longer have to deal with this bullshit, so I told her to leave me alone and hung up. His family would continue to harass me but stopped when I threatened to report to the police. I continue to pay the rent and bills like how I've always been doing. The only thing that's changed is I'm now so much happier. I'm the happiest I've ever been in years. I just got a promotion last week. I've been spending time enjoying life, with the extra money I have since I no longer have to pay for his expenses. As for my ex, he's moved in with his aunt. I got a protection order so we are not in contact at all. Relevant comments. Many people congratulate OP and wish her well. OP responds, "Thank you. It feels great to wake up in the morning and not have to worry about what kind of crap he is going to give me today. And OMG, the extra saving that I have since I'm not longer financially responsible for a full-grown adult. Thank you. I've realized that all the uncertainties that I had before really don't mean anything. My life is only getting better and I've received all the support I need from friends and family and people on Reddit too." Comment 1. How long were you in that relationship? OP's reply. I was in that relationship for 8 years. Comment 2. I hope you changed the locks. And why didn't you tell his family about his refusal to work? I hate that they think of him as the victim now, and that you used him to finance your studies and then dropped him. OP's reply. I haven't mentioned this, but his family is the type of people who it doesn't matter what he does, he's always right to them. I knew even if I told them that he refused to work, his family would still defend him and make excuses for his behavior. It has happened with other things before. But his family can take care of him all they want now. I didn't put this in the post because I didn't want the post to get too long, but when his auntie first called me, she told me if I kicked him out he wouldn't have anywhere to stay because she couldn't let him stay with her. I knew she was just saying that so that I would feel bad and wouldn't kick him out. So I told her it's none of my business and he needs to figure it out himself. Guess what? He moved right into his aunt's house after he was released. Comment 3. OP, will you be able to move? Given he seems unhinged, what are the chances of him coming back in a later date? He already has escalated to violence and seems like he has gotten his rotten morals from his family who enables him and may do the same. I read way too much RA and Baru hearing how bad things escalates. I hope you're able to do the following: filing a restraining order and documenting all instances of the abuse that has escalated. Consider moving and keep the information where you move to the down low. Plus a change of place may do wonders for your mental health. Invest in a Ring doorbell cam. It's for your safety and the dog's. Alert your rental, app or property that he is not allowed unless on a scheduled time to pick up his stuff. Find a safe space for you and your animals, in case he escalates again. Anyone who has gone to his manic level of harming you and animals will repeat until they find another obsession. He is an abuser and he's at the stage he lost control and is going berserk but may also be biding his time. Better be overly cautious than not. I hope you be fully free of him. OP's reply. I'm planning to move to a new place soon, and it's nicer. And closer to my work too, since I can now afford it with the extra money I have. I have no doubt he's capable of harming me and I'm honestly not sure if he would leave me alone. I'm considering filing a restraining order against his family also, because even though they've stopped coming to my place to try to gaslight and guilt trip me, they still try to call me sometimes, with different numbers since I blocked their numbers already. I just ordered a Ring camera and I'm also going to move to a new place soon. He doesn't even know where I work because he didn't care. He'd never taken me to work or even asked what company I work for. He only asked about my salary when I told him I got a new job. I was sad that he didn't care, but now I'm glad that he doesn't know much about me besides where I live. Comment 4. I hope you read this and seriously consider it. We are attracted to what is normal to us, not necessarily what is good for us. You need to spend some time with a therapist unpacking what in your past taught you to accept being used. Women, especially, are often taught to be people pleasers, even to the point of their own detriment. I hope you spend some time rewiring yourself to only accept respectful, loving treatment. My heart breaks that you went through this. I sincerely wish you well. OP's reply. I'm spending a lot of time taking care of myself. I have had a couple therapy sessions in the past couple weeks. The whole incident was traumatizing to me. I'm a lot happier but still need lots of time to heal. Update. It's been a year since I called the police on my ex-BF after he hurt me and threatened to hurt my dogs. I hope the same thing doesn't happen to anyone, but if you're currently in a similar relationship, I hope this post will help you realize good things will come after you stand up for yourself. After my ex was taken by the police, I dealt with some harassment from his family, but they eventually left me alone. I moved closer to my job in basically a different city that's 30 minutes away from my old apartment. I took some time to heal and went on vacation by myself. It was great. I finally look forward to coming home and spending time with my dogs. One of them passed away from cancer a couple months ago. About 6 months after the incident, I met someone. He's a great person and for the first time in a long time, someone treats me with love and respect. I'm very happy at the moment. I've learned to set boundaries and expectations early on to avoid being in the same situation again. Now to my ex's case. Yesterday, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. To be honest, I totally forgot about the case and I thought there's nothing else to follow up on. But they called to inform me that they'll be pressing charges and asked if I would be okay to testify. I said yes. It'll be hard for me to go to court and talk about the incident if he's right there, because even though I've completely moved on with my life, I can still feel the fear when I heard about the case. I'm somewhat still traumatized by the whole thing, but I think he needs to be responsible for his actions, especially after his auntie tried to defend his actions by blaming me. It really sucks that I have to go through all of that to end a toxic and abusive relationship, but I got out somewhat safely and I can't imagine what my life would be if I stayed. It was a hard time, but it's worth it. Things are definitely better and I'm surrounded by people who truly love me and appreciate me. Simple and little things in life truly make me happy. Like how my BF got me bubble tea and prepared dinner for me when I had a hard day at work last week. I can't believe just more than a year ago, I thought a day without an argument was already a good day. Relevant comments. Commenters were overwhelmingly proud and supportive of OOP in leaving and encouraged her to testify against her ex. Here are a sampling of those comments. Comment 1, good for you leaving that toxic situation. The exact thing happened to me last year as well. I was in a relationship with a toxic ex and I finally stood up for myself and ended the relationship. We had to love together until we figured out the living situation since unfortunately both our names were on the lease. The way I got out was by calling the police after he swung a soundbar at me. I'm still traumatized about it to this day. I'm in therapy for the things he did and said to me. He plead guilty, which I'm so glad that this nightmarish chapter can finally be over. OP's reply. I'm glad you were able to get out before things got worse. It's a very traumatizing experience, but therapy does help. I hope you have a good support system and are around people who care about you and understand your experience. Comment 2, you may want to reach out to the victim advocate and see if the prosecutor's office, or anyone else affiliated with the court, has an emotional support dog that you can have with you when you testify. I was pleasantly surprised that a small county near me had that for a person I work with when she had to testify against a family member. It helped her feel more calm and protected going into testifying. Am I the asshole for not allowing my daughter to visit my cousin's house because of her autistic son's behavior? My cousin and I both have 2 children who are the same age. We have 12-year-old boys and 11-year-old girls. Her 12-year-old son, Damien, is autistic and has a lot of issues that we believe are unrelated to autism, but we are no experts on the subject. My 12-year-old son, Christopher, loves hanging out with Damien because he enjoys knowing that he brings some sort of joy to Damien's otherwise rough life. Damien has been kicked out of every school he has attended, so he has no friends. Our daughters are the best of friends as well. They are basically inseparable. Well, about 2 weeks ago my cousin asked if she could take my kids for the week. COVID outbreak at school, so school was called off anyways. I said that was fine after asking the kids if they wanted to go. Everything was perfectly fine for the entire week, I thought. I checked on the kids often. They seemed happy and to be having fun. However, that all changed when I picked my kids up. That's when they told me all the weird shit Damien was doing. Such as my daughter would wake up to Damien stroking her hair or arms while she slept, and when she caught him, he pretended to be asleep. He went into his sister's room at some point during the night against his parents' rules. I guess he also told my daughter several times that he likes her, and when my daughter told my cousin about it, she basically said it's okay to have crushes, but where you're related, you simply can't act on it. I guess he also kept trying to take pictures of her. I'm unsure whether or not she corrected her son's behavior by touching my daughter in her sleep. However, I do know that not once did she tell me anything that happened. My kids did, while she kept it hush-hush. After finding all of this out, I called my cousin and said that my kids would no longer be allowed there because my daughter now felt uncomfortable around Damien. She is pissed because he doesn't mean it. It's not like he went out of his way to be weird. He doesn't understand. It's his autism, but says she ultimately understands. However, she's still making me feel bad about it because her kid has autism and doesn't know why he isn't allowed to see my kids anymore, and I guess he has been having a lot of outbursts since that point. One of them resulting in her needing to call the police because he became violent and started throwing chairs.
My stepdaughter wants her real dad to give her away, even though he breaks her heart by skipping town and breaking promises he makes to her. My stepdaughter will be getting married on August 3rd. The wedding planning has consumed most of her and her mother's life. I say her mother because we aren't married, though we've lived together for 10 years, for the past 6 months. My stepdaughter graduated last December from university. I paid for her to go to college, though it was a state school, it still ran $40,000. She does not have a job and has been living with us for the duration of her college career and since her graduation. I also bought her a car to get back and forth from school when she finished high school. From time to time her deadbeat father would pop into her life and she would fawn all over him. Although he has not contributed a cent to her education or paid any child support, though that is my girlfriend's fault as CS was not part of the settlement, she still loves him and wants him in her life. He stays long enough to break her heart by skipping town and breaking some promise that he made her. The wedding venue holds 250 people max. I gave them a list of 20 people that I wanted invited, since I was paying for everything. They told me that was no problem and they'd take care of it. So I let these people know they'd be getting an invite, and they should save the date. Saturday, I saw one of my friends on this list at the golf course and asked if he was coming. He told me that he wasn't invited. He told me that he got an announcement, but not an invitation. He had it in his back seat, along with probably 6 months of mail, and showed it to me. Sure enough, it was just an announcement, and my name was nowhere on it. It had her dad's name and her mom's name and not mine. This led to a pretty big fight with my girlfriend, as I found out that none of my list of 20 made the cut for the final guest list because 250 people is very tight. I was pissed, but not a hell of a lot I could do because the important people in my life had already been offended. My girlfriend said, if some people didn't RSVP yes, I might be able to get a couple people in. But that is an ultimate slap in the face in my opinion. So, I was boiling on Saturday. Yesterday we had a Sunday dinner with the future in-laws family and us and a surprise guest, the real dad. At this little dinner my stepdaughter announced that her real dad was going to be able to make it to her wedding and that now he'd be able to give her away. This was greeted with a chorus of, "Oh how great and how wonderfuls." I don't think I have ever felt so angry and so disrespected. I was shaking. I took a few seconds to gather my composure because I honestly wasn't sure if I would cry or start throwing punches or both. Once I was sure I'd be able to speak, I got up from my chair and said I'd like to make a toast. I can't remember exactly what I said, but the gist of it was this. I'd like to make a toast. The sound of spoons against glasses rings in my ears. It has been my great pleasure to be a part of this family for the past 10 years. Ah, how sweet. At this point in my life I feel I owe a debt of gratitude to the bride and groom, because they have opened my eyes to something very important. Confident smiles exchanged. They have shown me that my position in this family is not what I once thought it was. And now a glimmer of confusion and shock begins to spread on the faces in the room. Though I once thought of myself as the patriarch or godfather of the family, commanding great respect and sought out help in times of need, it seems instead that I hold the position of an ATM, good for a stream of money, but not much else. As I have been replaced as host, both on the invitations and in the ceremony, I am resigning my financial duties as host to my successor, real dad. So cheers to the happy couple and the path they have chosen. I finished my drink. You all can let yourselves out. Is this selfish? I'm supposed to shell out 40-50 grand for a wedding that I can't invite anyone to? That I am not a part of? I'm so done with this crap. I'm done with my stepdaughter. I'm done with my girlfriend. I transferred the money out of our joint account last night. She has not had a job since she moved in with me. This morning I called all the vendors I had written checks for deposits to refund my money. At present, it looks like I'll lose around $1,500 for the venue, but the other vendors have been great about refunding. Too long, didn't read. You want your real dad to be on the invitation, to give you away and to sit at the head table. Fine, your real dad can pay for everything too. Update 1. The immediate aftermath was a tantrum and people sitting there mumbling while not actually saying anything to me, but to each other. After much yelling with the GF about me being selfish, I spent the night in my home office and no one knocked on my door, not once. Today's aftermath is kind of depressing for me. GF brought me bride's wedding planner to show me how much work I was ruining. I thumbed through it, found a page in the music section for father-daughter dances. All of the songs were catered to real dad's taste. So I thought they were just being disrespectful, but now I'm feeling like they never really gave a crap at all, especially since the menu included 2 ingredients I'm allergic to, that actually made me laugh. Either way, I'm glad to be done, returned to the planner and asked her when she and the bride could move out. Also, I never promised to pay for the wedding. I offered them the use of my home when they were sure it was going to be small, but other than that, all I've heard is how it's the bride's family that should pay. So, let it be the bride's family then, aka, not me. Final update. Girlfriend and bride are now moved out. They are moving in with the groom. It was very hard not to be petty with some of the belongings they took with them, but it's done and I switched out the locks and now it's time for a brew. I can't believe how popular this story got, but I feel good to be given support by so many. If I find out what happens with the wedding, I will let you know, but I can't guarantee that I will put in the effort to find out. From what I've heard, they are trying to scale things back and get his parents to help out. GF burned bridges when I found out she tried to write herself a check on our joint account the day after the unpleasantness. By then I had already moved money, so I guess I'm a bigger ass than her, but I could feel it coming. That's all. Thanks.
Weird guy shows up at my parents' house at 1 a.m. looking for me using details from 20 years ago. Help me figure out this mystery. Posted this on the Creepy Encounter sub and someone suggested I post here. This happened 3 nights ago and I'm going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment 1 month ago and I'm still unpacking and settling in. I have been using my parents' address as my mailing address, who live a few towns over, 20 minutes away, all of my life. 3 nights ago my parents called me at 2 a.m. and freaked out and proceeded to tell me this story. Apparently at 1 a.m. someone starts banging on their front door and repeatedly ringing their doorbell. My stepdad walks downstairs and opens the door, leaving the front glass door closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, who looked to be in his 30s, with a black hoodie on with the hood pulled up around his face. He didn't have any distinguishing facial features, facial hair or tattoos. The only thing my stepdad said was that he looked to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad or my mother, who was watching the whole thing out a window, recognized the man. The man says, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my full name." My stepdad plays dumb and says, "Who?" The man proceeds to state my full name again and says that my boyfriend is worried because I didn't come home that night. He claims to be a friend of my boyfriend and tells my stepdad that they are both out looking for me, worried because I didn't show up at home. I don't have a boyfriend. I live by myself with my 3 dogs and haven't been in a relationship in the past 5-6 months. Here's the weird part. My stepdad asked the guy what boyfriend he was talking about and the man told him the name of the boyfriend I had when I was in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade has a very, very unique Italian name. I've never met anyone with a full name even close to his. He says my high school boyfriend's name a few more times to ensure my stepdad heard him and repeats that they are very worried about me. Is my stepdad sure I'm not inside? At this point my stepdad is weirded out and closes and locks the door in his face. The man does not leave. He lingers in front of my parents' house for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone. Finally, my parents called the cops. About 5 minutes before the cops arrive, the man walks down to the dead end on their block and drives away in a silver car. Stepdad was unable to get the license plate. My parents file a police report and nothing else happens. After I hear this story I am going nuts over the weird details. How would someone know who I dated nearly 20 years ago and what would the motive be of making up a story that included that weird detail about my past? I have not had contact with a 10th grade boyfriend in over a decade. Yesterday, I decided to message him on Facebook to see if he has any insight. I tell him the whole story. He's just as confused as I am and claims to have no part in it. I am at a loss. I'm also really freaked out that some strange man is going through that much trouble at 1 a.m. to look for me. Any insights or ideas would be greatly appreciated. No, nothing else weird has happened since then. Update 1. Wow, this really blew up. Thank you so much for all the kind words and precautions that I should take. I want to add something here that a few people commented on, that might shine some light on this mystery. First off, I am not in any legal trouble and have no reason to think someone would be suing me. God, I guess it's always in the realm of possibility that I'm being sued by someone, but I really don't think that's it. Like I previously commented, I had an expired registration ticket that I did not show up to court for, but I believe I got a letter in the mail just asking me to pay a really large fee, so I don't think that's related. I did take a personal loan out. Took it out about 1.5 years ago. It wasn't anything too crazy and I was really good with making payments on time until about 6 months ago when I had a medical issue. Currently, I am really behind on payments, but to my knowledge, I have not defaulted on the loan yet. What do you guys think? Related? I had absolutely no idea that this is a thing or I would have included this detail to begin with. Let me know your thoughts. Update 2. I have a list of a few things that I am going to look into tomorrow, based on my own thoughts and based on a ton of valuable feedback I got in here. Thank you. We'll post an update ASAP. Update 3. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to update. It's a super busy time at work. Unfortunately there isn't much to report. I called the loan company. They claim to have nothing to do with it. All of my friends and family also noted that the 1 a.m. factor kind of rules that out anyway. Nothing else strange has happened to my parents. I went there for the first time last night and kept a close eye out for anything, didn't observe anything out of the norm. So this remains a mystery. I'll be sure to update if something else happens. Final update. Alright, 1 year later I finally have an update to this insane mystery. I will include the original story here first followed by the update. After this happened my family and a couple of my close friends have been talking about this mystery in depth to try and put our heads together to figure it out. We all have our own theories, but ultimately no definitive answer as to what happened or who this creeper was. So we pretty much put it to rest and only continued to joke about it once in a while. Here's the update. My stepsister, my stepdad's daughter, and her fiancé were at a house party right after the holidays, around early January of this year. While they were there, they started talking to a girl that neither of them knew. After some time talking together, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and how they were going through a really tough time together. They had just recently broken up and she felt really bad because he was a wreck over it. Somehow it came up that this girl's ex-boyfriend was my 10th grade boyfriend, the one with the really unique Italian name. The whole situation wasn't that big of a coincidence, since I went to high school with my stepsister's fiancé and we have a lot of mutual friends. So it makes sense that they were at a party that would include some people I went to high school with. As soon as my stepsister and her fiancé hear this, they both start freaking out and without revealing too many details, they tell the girl about the whole mystery and how weird it was. As they are telling the story, the girl's face starts to go white and she looks like she's about to cry. My stepsister and fiancé try to console her and ask her what's wrong. The wine beer had been flowing at this point, so I'm sure everyone was a little tipsy. The girl starts to tell them that a few nights ago, she was sleeping, and someone started banging on her door at, get this, fucking 1 a.m., just like what happened to me at my parents'. The girl jumps out of bed and says she was absolutely terrified by how loud and aggressive someone was banging on her door. She said she literally thought it was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so looks at her phone. There on the camera is a guy in a black hoodie, banging on her door. She obviously pretends like she isn't home and keeps all of the lights off. He continues banging. As she is getting ready to dial 911, the guy stops and leaves. She said she was absolutely terrified. For whatever reason, she didn't end up calling the cops, but may have gone to stay with a friend that night or the night after. My stepsister and fiancé are shocked by the details and how similar it is to my story, especially because of the mutual ex-boyfriend we share, except this girl literally just broke things off with him. They asked the girl if she has any idea who the guy is and she said no, but that it definitely is not the actual ex-boyfriend. She said this guy was much taller and heavier than our shared mutual ex. How fucking weird. This mystery is still unsolved and these new details honestly just make my head spin even more. No one else has shown up to my parents' door since the actual incident a year ago. OP added extra info in the comments. So a few answers to some questions. My 10th grade boyfriend was into drugs when I dated him back in high school. No idea if he continued to use throughout his life or not, but can confirm he is definitely an addict who may or may not be in recovery currently. My 10th grade boyfriend has been to my parents' house multiple times. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in, and my 10th grade boyfriend has been over many times while we dated in high school. I don't know where he currently lives, but he grew up about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. My 10th grade boyfriend and I had a horrific breakup. I met my high school sweetheart while I was dating him and broke up with him in a pretty messed up way. He held a grudge over it all throughout high school and was extremely nasty to me to the point of bullying. At one point, I had to get a security guard to escort me to classes because him and his friends were bullying me so badly. The bullying was only severe for the rest of 10th grade, but he definitely hated me all throughout high school. At one point he did end up apologizing to me, and explained that he was just heartbroken over me breaking up with him, but at that point, I was way past the point of forgiving him. After graduating high school, we ran into each other maybe once or twice while I was home from college and he was totally cordial and nice with me and we laughed the high school experiences off. I can definitely try reaching out to him on Facebook again and bringing back up this whole mystery with the added updates from his recent ex-girlfriend to see what his reaction is and gauge whether or not he's being truthful in it. I can also ask some mutual high school friends who know him about how he currently is, if he's into any shady shit or not. My stepsister only gave me a first name and description of a recent ex-girlfriend from the party. But I can go on my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for her under his friends, then reach out to her on Facebook Messenger to inquire about Ring footage and ask her more questions, also see if she ever reached out to cops. I agree this is probably the best thing to do if I want more answers, but I agree I need to be careful as I still don't know what is going on here. My 10th grade boyfriend does not have a brother, just one younger sister that I remember back from high school. Relevant comments from OP Comment 1. I just posted some answers in the comments about the nature of my breakup with my high school boyfriend and how horrific it was and how he basically harassed me for the rest of the 10th grade. Your last theory, and what a lot of other people are commenting on, is starting to make the most sense to me. It could be that my 10th grade boyfriend has a tendency to get insanely hung up on girls and is sending a close friend or relative to do these 1 a.m. drop-bys. And this would especially make sense if he is still using drugs like he did in high school. This theory being correct would mean he lied to me when I reached out to him on Facebook a year ago, which of course he would. If this is the case, it seems like he moved on to his current ex. I just hope he doesn't swing back around to me. Comment 2. I decided I'm going to try and find out the girl's full name so I can look her up on social media. I may even be able to find her with just the first name that I already know from my steps. I can go onto my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look in his friend list for a girl with the same first name who looks like she could have been his ex-girlfriend. He may even have pictures with her tagged, so it shouldn't be that hard, unless he wiped his social media clean of her after they broke up. When I'm able to find her, I'm going to reach out to her and try and get some answers. I think this is the safest route since I still don't know my 10th grade boyfriend's role in this, and I did already ask him once and he claimed to have no part in it or know anything, which may or may not have been a lie. Based on how scared my stepson said this girl was, I'm betting she'll be willing to talk to me about it since we share the experience. I will make an update post when I have more info. Thanks everyone.